here I am again in my car. My husband always needs the office for work, and my kids are always in the house, so this seems to be the best way, the only way for me to have a little bit of quiet to make these videos. Okay, before we get started with today's video, because oh my goodness, so much has happened. There are so many crazy things we're going to talk about today. So before we get into all of that, I want to start off with something positive. I don't know about you, but for me, this was all starting to take a toll on me, physically and emotionally and spiritually. I was starting to feel when you're fed negative news 24/7. Every time you turn on the TV, you get in the car, you turn on the radio, you check your email, look at your phone, talk to a family member on the phone, you're always hearing about the latest. You just can't get away from it, and it's always negative. And after hearing so much of that day in and day out for so long, and then add to that, the temples are still closed, so we can't go in and do the work and be fulfilled and edified that way, have that connection with the Lord that way. And the churches have been closed, so we haven't been able to be fed spiritually that way. We haven't been able to go and be surrounded by our friends and our ward members, our community. All the activities have been canceled. A lot of service opportunities had been canceled. Just everything good that's associated with church, for the most part, had been canceled. So being fed negativity nonstop, having ward services, church, and the temple sort of cut out of your life starts to create this cocktail of negative thoughts and feelings, such as hopelessness. I don't know about you, but there were some days where I started to feel like things were hopeless. People were hopeless. Politicians are hopeless. There were days when I would have some doubts about certain things. There were days when it felt like, why even try? Why even get ready today? Why even take care of myself? What's the purpose? I had said before in my last video how it was starting to feel like Groundhog Day. Every day just waking up and doing it all again and again. Nothing really changing. And noticing all the limitations that we have because of the COVID-19, because of the riots, just all of the restrictions and limitations, and how there was a point when I said to my sister, it kind of feels like I'm claustrophobic, like I can't breathe. Just all these restrictions and limitations, and they just keep getting tighter and tighter as the weeks go by. Not being able to breathe, not having that freedom, being confined. And I was starting to feel that way spiritually. I wanted to get out and go to the temple and do work for my ancestors and be at church. Actually see the primary kids. Just not being able to do all those things was starting to take a toll on me. So the other day I decided to take the bull by the horns, and I created a schedule for my family just for the morning until lunch. So the night before, I kind of talk with my kids and I say, here's the chores that I need you to do when you wake up, and here's the times that you'll do them. So you wake up at 8:30, you get started on this. You're done by 9, then you get started on this. Then you move on to that. Then you move on to one more thing, and then it's lunchtime. After lunch, finish up what you haven't finished, and then the rest of the afternoon you have free time. You can do whatever you want. And just having that stability and consistency in our household has done wonders for my kids, for my husband, and for me. Because we talk about it the night before, my kids feel like they have a say in what their chores are. We discuss it, so they're actually happy to do it. Then they wake up themselves. They get started on their chores. I'm not having to follow them around and say, oh, get started on that, or you need to do this. They know what they need to do. We've talked about it the night before. And they're busy from 8:30 a.m. until noon. They're busy. And I've noticed this has actually made them happier. 2 of my kids who hate chores have said to me, Mom, I love this. This is fun. And they actually do a good job, and they take their time, and we play music, and somehow it's fun for them. But because they're busy doing that, I'm able to use the morning to focus on me. I'm able to get up, go outside, and go on a walk. Come back, shower, get ready, do some things that I need to get done so that by the time lunch rolls around, the house is clean. I feel like I've had time for myself, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And then the rest of the day is smooth sailing. While I'm out on my walks, I do my best not to listen to YouTube videos, not to listen to the news or podcasts or anything that's talking about the negative events that are going on in the world right now. I use that time to listen to music that uplifts me. And as I'm listening to those songs, I go to a happy place in my mind. If the song reminds me of happy past memories, I go there in my mind. If the song makes me hopeful about the future and I find myself daydreaming, I go there in my mind. So while I'm listening to music, sometimes I'm in the past, sometimes I'm in the present, sometimes I'm in the future. But wherever I am, I'm far away from the events that are happening in the news. And just doing that for an hour in the morning with the fresh air and the sunshine. And the other day there was clouds and a little bit of light rain and it smelled so good outside. Just having an hour of that in the morning is starting to pull me out of that negative place and put me in a better state of mind and help me stay focused on the positive and have hope. So speaking of music, as I was out the other day on my walk, I couldn't help but notice I had my songs on shuffle. And as these different random songs were shuffling through, I started to notice a message forming. And so I couldn't help but write it down, but I felt like the way and the order that the songs were playing in, it's almost as though someone was narrating what's happening right now in the world, in my life. So here's the message. While the good old days may not return, and the rocks might melt, and the sea may burn, eagle's calling, and he's calling your name. Tides are turning, bringing winds of change. Why do I feel this way? The promise of a new day. So I get from that even though things are changing, and it's just crazy right now, there is this promise of a new day. Things are going to get better. What you going to do when things go wrong? What you gonna do when it all cracks up? What you gonna do when the love burns down? What you gonna do when the flames go up? Who's gonna come and turn the tide? What's it gonna take to make a dream survive? Who's got the touch to calm the storm inside? Who's gonna save you? Of course, that's our Savior Jesus Christ. Well, I won't back down. No, I won't back down. You can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. No, I'll stand my ground. Won't be turned around, and I'll keep this world from dragging me down. Gonna stand my ground, and I won't back down. Well, I know what's right. I got just one life. In a world that keeps on pushing me around, but I'll stand my ground, and I won't back down. Yes, that was Tom Petty, if you figured it out. We are listening. And we're not blind. This is your life. This is your time. Of course, when I heard those lyrics in this other song, I thought, yes, we were born for this. This is why we were born at this time, for such a purpose as this. It's like we just can't help ourselves because we don't know how to back down. We were called out to the streets. We were called out to the towns. Okay, as I'm hearing that, I'm thinking of the protesters. This is what the protesters are thinking. This is what's going on. And as the kids took back the parks, you and I were left with the streets. And I thought about COVID-19, how the parks were closed down for so long, and suddenly as those restrictions were lifted, they started to open up the parks again, and we started seeing all the kids outside again at the parks. And then the protesters, we saw them in the streets. Then I heard the Lord talking in these lyrics. I want you to want me. And then here is our response to him. Every single night, I find it harder to sleep because I need you here with me. I think this is how a lot of us are feeling with all the uncertainty that keeps happening in the world, how it's increasing every day. We're finding it harder to sleep at night. We need the Savior with us. Every day, you're saying the words that I want you to say. There's a pain in my heart, and it won't go away. I need you here with me. And so I felt that this is how we feel when we're reading the scriptures. When we're reading the Word of God, we're hearing His words, and He's saying the words that we want Him to say. And there's this pain in our heart as we watch what's going on in the world. And the more we watch it, and we're not reading the Word, we're not listening to our Savior and hearing His voice, that pain doesn't seem to go away. We can't seem to find that peace, which is why we need Him here with us. We need to always have His Spirit with us. So I wanted to share that with you because it's just another reminder of how the Lord speaks to us in so many different ways. Are we listening? Are we hearing what He has to say? Also, I've been using my time to go through all of our old family videos. Yes, I've been going through old thumb drives and hard drives from years ago, beyond the last decade, over the past 2 decades. And I'm pulling all those videos together and organizing them and organizing photos, and I'm finally putting them into video projects. I've had all these files just kind of all over the place over the years, and every year I'll say, this is the year where I get it all together, I get it all organized. My kids haven't seen a lot of these pictures and videos of themselves from when they were little. And the other day, my husband got a notification from YouTube that they had deleted one of our family videos from several years ago off of his channel. So when YouTube first started, we had a different channel where we just uploaded short video clips of our kids. That's where we've stored those videos over the years. And I kept telling myself I need to finally download those and put them into one place because I feel like I might lose them. And sure enough, YouTube reached out to him and said, we deleted one of your videos from several years ago. We don't even know what video it was, what memory we've lost now, because they didn't tell us, and they didn't tell us why they deleted it. And I don't want this to keep happening. I don't want to lose more memories of my kids and more videos. So this weekend I finally took the time to go through and locate all those old videos and pictures, and I've been working on that. I consider that family history. Just an afterthought that I wanted to add into this part of the video. As I've been watching these old family videos that are near and dear to my heart, I have been crying. And I want to say it's because when I look back at these videos, it reminds me of simpler times when we didn't have all of this craziness going on. Life just seems so much more simple, and the memories were always good. My kids were so little, so adorable. Of course, we were all so much younger, and I look back at myself then, and I look back at my kids then, and I think, my, how times have changed. Did they ever imagine when they were that little that 8, 9, 10 years later, their lives would be so different, that the world wouldn't feel safe? And as I look back at myself as a young mom, and I think, wow, back then I had no idea that just a decade later, this would be our reality. And so every time I watch these videos, I just sob. Sometimes it's therapy. Sometimes you need to get it out because we hold it in all the time, trying to be strong for our kids. But really, we're just as tired of everything that's going on. I think more than ever, we're all ready for the Savior to come. So that's been my therapy. So I've been feeling really productive over the last several days. I've been feeling productive, organized, accomplished. And because we've had this schedule, this system in our home, my kids now feel stability and security. With everything going on in the world right now, I don't think they had been feeling stability and security. I don't even know if they were feeling safe. So having this schedule every single day has given them that stability, that security that they so much have needed. So I just had to share that with you. Speaking of family history projects and positive news, here's something I wanted to share with you. This also goes along with talking about patterns, things that repeat that we see all the time, how there's a message in that for us. So in a group chat a few weeks ago, my friend Beth wrote this. She said, "In other news, I've been praying to get a genealogy project going I can really get into. This one line keeps coming up for me. Then last week, the term Blackwater kept showing up in random posts on Facebook. It stood out and kept repeating, so I took a picture. The last few days, my mom and I have really started to dive into a brick wall on this branch of the family that keeps coming up. We were trying to pinpoint where this couple lived to find their church and hopefully new records. When we searched for more info on the other signatures on the marriage bond, it took us to a place called Blackwater Church. We'd never even heard of it. Even though my mom is from the area, it closed down in the mid-1800s. But it looks to be where they're from, and possibly even where their marriage would have happened. We were both just floored. Totally random, but thought you guys would appreciate seeing how things that pop up repeatedly really are often divine messages. We've been stuck on this line for 20 plus years. So these doors opening up are so exciting. What's interesting is we found there was a pair of Welsh brothers that founded the Blackwater Church that I told you guys about. And their dad, the Welshman, went to North Carolina to start a church. The place he went to was an area I just bought a book for. I think I told you guys about that, where I sat down to look for my dad's line in the book, but instead it came to mind to look for my mom's side. And I found people with their surname on page 144, our pay attention number. Well, apparently those of 144 people are in the same area as this Welsh minister, whose sons established the Blackwater Church up in Delaware. That's probably clear as mud. But the point is, it has amazed me to see those two separate experiences come together. We're now looking at all these families that attended the Blackwater Church of Delaware and seeing their surnames down in North Carolina by the Welsh father who was also a minister. It's also in the area I lived for a few years, oddly enough. So we've started wondering if these families were also Welsh and moved to the two areas following the ministers. The whole research process and what has been coming out has just been fascinating. I feel like these little clue breadcrumbs are being left everywhere for us. Oh, the surnames I found on page 144 in North Carolina are from a line we're stuck on that was attending Blackwater Church in Delaware. Just what are the odds I feel drawn to buy this random book about North Carolina and this family from Delaware keeps having ties to it? Also, just seeing all the Welsh ties and how they are the men starting the churches has me thinking all our discussions on the Welsh people being tied to Israel and to Christ. I've been discussing these surnames in a Welsh genealogy group, and a Welshman told me this: the first thing a Frenchman does in a new country is to build a trading post. An American builds a city, a German builds a beer hall, and a Welshman builds a church. It's interesting because this Welshman minister that established the church in North Carolina in the mid-1700s, other Welsh followed him there, but who also came to the area were the Ulster Scotch-Irish, which is the other bloodline we've talked about. My research has shown the people of that area then migrated down to the other areas of the South and filled all the southern states. Essentially, they created the Bible Belt of the South with its deep religious convictions. But something I've wondered about for a long time, it seems there are certain bloodlines that joined the church and went straight to Utah. Much of these were Welsh, Ulster Irish, or descendants of the New England Pilgrim groups. Clearly, there are some important bloodlines there. But something I've wondered about for a long time, it seems there are certain bloodlines that joined the church and went straight to Utah. Much of these were Welsh, Ulster Irish, or descendants of the New England Pilgrim groups. Clearly, there are some important bloodlines there. But there seems to be a second group from these areas that filled out the southern U.S. and has become mainstream Christian groups today that really have not been very receptive to the church. What's the difference between these bloodlines? Why has one group quickly accepted the church while the other has been opposed to it, yet still spiritual? So she's talking about groups that migrated over from the UK area, came to America, and branched out to different regions of the country, all coming here for religious freedom. But this one particular group that went to the South, to this day, has little interest in the church. So for example, in our area of Delaware, there are a lot of Scots, Irish, some Welsh, but mainly British. The church has never been big there. They practiced religious freedom early on, accepting Huguenots, Amish, and Quaker when other states kicked those groups out, have always been mainly Methodist in faith and a people that loved the Lord. But it is crazy rare to see anyone join the church from that area. Even today, there's not a church in that area. You have to go to the next county over to attend a ward meeting. So you can imagine my surprise when a woman from my current ward noted she had an ancestor from this county I'm talking about who ended up joining the church in the early days. In fact, her ancestor was taught by Orson Pratt while on his way to a mission in England. I was floored. She then shared that she went on to share this experience with her mom about Blackwater Church, and look at the time it was when she sent this text to her mom. 1:44. There it is again. So she talked about how she kept hearing this word Blackwater. It kept coming up. And eventually it led her to this family history discovery that was monumental. I loved that. Anyways, wanted to start with the positive. Now let's move into all the craziness that's going on right now. So just moments ago, the news broke that Chad Daybell had been arrested and that human remains have been found on his property. So I'm sure by the time I've published this video, more will have come out about that. But I think a lot of us were thinking the same thing. It's about time. I had heard that they've finally been able to get Lori to do some talking. So it's possible that she gave them enough information that they were able to get a search warrant and discover what they did. But my husband pointed out that's why it's a good thing that no one bailed her out, because had she been bailed out, this discovery might have never happened. Anyways, that example right there perfectly illustrates what I believe we're going to see more of this year. I really feel like more people who have caused injustice, who have been committing crimes and getting away with it, things are finally going to start to happen this year. There's going to be headway, there's going to be arrests, and we're going to start to see some people facing that accountability. So recently, East Idaho News did an interview with Lori's best friend, Melanie, and as I watched it, I couldn't help but notice a lot of the things that she said were things that I talked about in my 3-part video series last fall when I exposed all of these groups and all of these people, and I put out a warning to everyone to be careful, to back away from these groups and these people. I talked about their teachings and how dangerous they are. I gave specific details and names and experiences of people who had already died because of these dangerous teachings. And it was my hope that by sharing this, it could help people get back on the path. It could help people realize who these people really are and that they are wolves in sheep's clothing. I had heard a few months ago from some other people that they had shared my videos with Melanie. I'm not sure if that's true, I can't verify that, but it was interesting because when I watched her interview, she talked about the very things I talked about in my video. Some of those things were, I talked about the fruits of Jesus, and I said when Jesus was on the earth doing his ministry, he wasn't going around killing zombies. He wasn't going around being a hitman. He wasn't doing that. Everything was done in peace and love, and he was serving. And I also talked about how we need to pray for these people. We need to pray for the people who have been deceived and the people who are doing the deceiving, because the Lord cares about them too, and he knows what they're doing, and he wants them back. And so I did talk about that we do need to have that compassion in our hearts to pray for them. Doesn't mean we have to be buddies with them or converse with them, but we do need to pray for them. I also brought up the dangerous doctrine of multiple probations, multiple lives, multiple mortalities, reincarnation, it's all the same thing, and how that was a common teaching in all of these groups. I talked about this deep rabbit hole that I had gone down to discover this connection and these core doctrines that all these groups share. And I even went over the history of how these people all know each other, who was the first to start this doctrine, and the methods that they use for hearing from the other side. I talked about all of that. I exposed all of it in hours and hours worth of video. It's long, but I did go through. I thought it would be interesting to go through and pick some of those clips. I put together right now a montage of some of those things that I brought up in those videos and how I said that these people are about to be exposed. They're going to be brought to accountability, brought to justice. And then a couple months after I made these videos, we hear about Chad Daybell and Lori, and we start seeing these things unfold. I had shared these messages and recorded these videos last year before all of this even happened, and it's crazy to see how fast it ended up happening after I shared this message. And I said that 2020 was the year of perfect vision, the year of the Lord's perfect vision. I could just feel something big and monumental was going to happen in 2020, that life would never be the same. So I often talked about that in my videos last year. And I never anticipated the kind of changes and how life would never be the same. What we've been experiencing this year is not what I imagined. I thought they would be these incredible, amazing changes. However, I will say that all these crazy challenges we've been going through this year, I believe, are going to refine us. They're going to make things better. Eventually, we know it gets better. So anyways, it's just been interesting to see all of this unfold so quickly. And I do want to point out one more thing I will talk about in these video clips. I did say last year that when I came out and exposed all of these groups and people, false teachings and doctrines and organizations, when I exposed all this, there were a lot of people who were following me and watching my videos and pretty friendly with me online. But as soon as I said this, it very much offended them, because they were a part of these groups and they did believe these teachings. In fact, they taught them as well, and I knew that. So they were very upset, and a lot of people unfriended me, unfollowed me, and some people I had to block because they were attacking and bullying me online, and it got pretty bad. So I had to block a lot of these people. And later on, even though I had blocked them, they would tag me in other groups, and they would say, especially when the story about Chad Daybell, Lori, and the missing children first broke, when it first broke, these very people who had attacked and bullied me for exposing these groups and these teachings, they said, you know, we believe Chad is innocent, we believe Lori's innocent, we believe these children are alive, and there's a good reason that they're in hiding. So, you know, they were very upset that people were assuming the worst and that people continued to say that these groups are dangerous, these teachings are dangerous, these people are dangerous. These people were still offended by that. They still couldn't see the truth. They still couldn't see the light and recognize it for what it is. And that's because of pride. They were very prideful, didn't want to admit that they had been deceived themselves. So they continued to support Chad and Lori and say that they were innocent. And they began to attack and bully other people online who were trying to come out and expose these teachings and these groups. And I'm wondering what they're thinking right now. I'm wondering, with the recent news that has broke about the children's bodies being found on Chad's property and now that he's been arrested, I'm wondering if they've now finally changed their tune, if they've now finally come to repentance and admitted that, yeah, these people were deceived and they were deceivers, and I was deceived and I was defending them and defending their teachings, and so I need to repent. I'm wondering if they've since had a change of heart on this. But Chad Daybell and Lori aren't the only ones. They're not the only wolves in sheep clothing. There's so many others that I think are even more dangerous than Chad and Lori. And I've talked about these people and their groups and what they're doing and teaching. I've been in their classrooms, I've been in their workshops, I've seen their videos, I've met most of them in person, so I know firsthand what they're doing and what they're teaching. They have caused innocent people to die because of their teachings. And I remember I reached out, I think it was January, maybe February, to East Idaho News to let them know that this is a growing epidemic here in Utah and Idaho, and that this is huge. There is a deep rabbit hole. Chad and Lori aren't the only ones. I wanted to give them this information, but they weren't interested. But anyways, I put together a clip right here. I've got this montage of clips of what I said last year. And just to see how crazy it is, how quickly all of this has now come into the light. So here it is. I can't tell you how many people I have come across just over the past few weeks. People that I have always known to be strong, good members of the church who have since fallen away because of their affiliation with these groups, because of their teachings. These people are being convinced that they need to move on from and rise above the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that they need to run ahead of the shepherd. Rather than stay behind him and be protected from the wolves, they need to run ahead. And as they run ahead, they're running into these wolves, and they're being pulled in to the most crazy, bizarre deceptions that I have ever heard. I mean, you can see the fruits of this work. It's destroying families, it's destroying lives. There isn't anything good coming out of this. But clearly, it's obvious that Satan is doing all that he can right now to prevent God's plans for 2020. Clearly, he knows that God has something big in store for this year, and he's going to do all he can to interfere with that. There are many wolves in sheep's clothing that are operating all throughout Christianity, all throughout the different churches, and how the Lord was finally going to expose them and pull them out. There are many, many wolves out there ready and willing to attack. You know, I'm such a friendly person. So many people reach out to me all the time and want to invite me to their events and their groups and their gatherings, but I have to be so careful because I've seen it happen time and time again, where I go to something to be supportive or I go to be kind, and then I see these things happening and I see what's really going on, and then again I have to pull away. The Spirit has showed me so many things, many of which I don't feel are right to share so publicly in this video, so I'm not going to share those stories or details, but I just want to say we need to be so careful. And I think this right here could be a part of the great deception that President Nelson keeps referring to. We know there's this great deception coming where even the very elect will be deceived. And a lot of times we often think about, well, that's the Antichrist, right? That's the false prophet. But I think this is building up to that. I think a lot of people who are quick to accept all of these teachings and accept this world are going to be the people who are so quick to accept the Antichrist and the false prophet and whatever else lies ahead. But if we can recognize deception right now with what's going on in the world and what's being taught, and recognize these philosophies that are being mingled with doctrine, that is how we're going to be prepared for the great deception that's coming. And I think a lot of times the reason people are so quick and so willing to go down these paths and explore these teachings is because they're bored. The moment they do this, they are in danger of being injured by the wolves. That is so fitting. I have seen men in the days of Joseph bring up principles and read and teach and advocate theories when the prophet would say, "It is not right to do so. They are not true." Those men would still argue, maintain their position, and they would write in defense of their theories when the prophet condemned them, and they would say, "We have no faith in your theory, nor in the system you present." The very moment a man does that, he crosses the path of the servant of God, who is set to lead the way to life and salvation. This is so prevalent today. And 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 3 and 4. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lusts shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. And they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables. This is what we're experiencing today. We're seeing a lot of people who have itching ears, and so they're turning to all these groups and organizations who are feeding them nothing but fables. But they just want to scratch that itch. Is my former publisher, Chad Daybell, and his new wife, because those of you who figured it out and made that connection and knew who my publisher was, you knew that he was also the man in the story that I was being tagged in. So people were basically saying, "Look, Lindsay, have you heard about today's headline? Because I think you'll be really interested to know about it, especially with what you just shared in your last video message." Another pattern that I've noticed is a lot of these people are saying, "I have seen the Lord. He's been conversing with me face to face. I'm conversing with angels and all kinds of beings face to face. I've had my calling and election made sure. I've been told that I'm good in this life, that I have made it, and that now my job is to just help others reach that point as well and help them find healing, and this is my calling. And I've had all these powerful heavenly manifestations to prove this and confirm this to me. This is a common pattern I'm hearing all of these people saying, all of these groups and these people who have left the church. This is how it started. It started with these experiences. It started on this path. It started with seeking out this secret knowledge and these mysteries and being led to these groups and being pulled off the covenant path. Even to the point where some have said, I don't need the temple anymore. I don't need the covenants. I've graduated from all of that. I'm on to something higher. And I've talked about that in my past video messages. It is the greatest deception that we are experiencing right now in our day. These things are all so distracting that it's pulling people away from focusing on the Lord and what He's doing and His plans. And the fact that our Savior Jesus Christ is returning very soon. I mean, that should be our focus. That should be what drives us right now. And as I said earlier, all of these crazy conspiracies that people have dismissed are now going to start surfacing into the light, and we're going to start seeing truth and realizing some of them weren't so crazy after all. I mentioned that all these things I've been discovering reminds me of an NBC Dateline episode or a 2020 special. And so I had messaged that to some friends as well. And one of them responded and said, interesting that you said a 2020 special, considering the year that we're going into, 2020. Just a reminder that all of these wolves in sheep's clothing are being exposed by the end of the year to prepare for that new perfect vision for 2020. You've awakened to all this new knowledge, to this level of a higher spiritual plane. You are piercing the veil. You are about to converse with heaven. And you'll have manifestations, entities, beings, whatever it may be, to come to you to get you to believe that this is good, that this is of the Lord, that you are spiritually awakened. This is your calling. You have been chosen, right? But it's all part of that deception. And He's pulling so many people away doing this. These were terms and words and phrases and things that I had never heard before. Now those are key words right there. When you start hearing things that you've never heard before, that's a red flag, because everything, you guys, is in the Word of God. This was saying, here's a new teaching you've never heard of before, but I can prove it. Here's some scriptures that sort of talk about it. I mean, at least it sounds like they're talking about it. And then once you open up that door, you just get pulled into so much more. And then you walk away thinking, wow, how come I've never been taught this? How come so many people around me who have grown up in the church or who have grown up being Christian have never been taught any of this? Wow, this is amazing. Wow, I feel like I have to share this with someone or I'm going to explode, but I can't. Because if I start sharing this with my family, they're going to think I'm crazy. They're not going to believe me. In fact, some of them might even chastise me. I don't want that. So at that point, you have some choices to make. You keep it all into yourself, and then you start to feel isolated and lonely, and no one understands me. So you only want to be around these people who are learning what you're learning because they understand you. Or you start to share it with those that you love. You open up to your sister or your brother or your mom or your dad or one of your friends or neighbors, thinking that they're going to be open, thinking that they're going to listen and be just as interested as you were. And suddenly they respond with resistance. That's not for me. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to accept that. In fact, I reject that, and I think you should too. And all of a sudden it just hits you like a knife and you feel, oh my goodness, how could you? How could you reject this? And you think, well, I can't trust you then. I can never come to you and share things with you because you're not open. We're not realizing that sometimes those negative feelings that don't feel good are our red flags. They're warnings. It's a warning for us that this isn't of the Lord. Now, the Spirit doesn't always fill us with warm, happy, comfortable feelings. Sometimes the Spirit puts up caution signs and warning signs. Don't go any further. Stop. Look at what you're doing right now. Is this of the Lord? Are these conversations of the Lord? Are the feelings, thoughts, and emotions that you're experiencing right now coming from the Lord? Are you feeling any peace in this? Either when you're feeling isolated and all alone because you feel like no one understands you in your family, so you're just going to choose to be around people who get you and understand you and who are like you. Is that of the Lord? Is there any peace in that when you're pushing everyone else out of your life? And the answer is no. Is there pride in that? Well, the answer is yes. You start to elevate yourself. You know what? I'm better than all these other people. That's what it is. I'm more open-minded. I'm more willing to learn. So God's going to show me more. And they're just going to be left out because they're blind sheep. They're just blind sheep who are just lukewarm in the gospel, who just want the milk, they don't want the meat. And so let them be that way. They can all have each other, and I'm going to go off and be with these other people who are more like me. And you kind of start to put yourself above those people around you. And you start coming up with all this justification, all this reasoning in your mind of why you're on this special path to learn all these amazing things, but you have to do it quietly so no one points fingers at you or makes accusations and makes you experience those bad feelings that you don't want to feel. And we're going to use you to gather in the 144,000 and usher in the millennium. We're going to use you. And so all these people everywhere are feeling super important, super special. I've been chosen. Whether some spirit messenger has told me that myself, or my friends and people from these other groups have been visited by messengers who told them that I'm to be a part of this. Now from there was even more of a pattern. From there, these messengers were telling these people, look, if your spouse is not on board with you and doesn't support you in all these things that you're learning and doing, you need to leave them. They are dangerous to your mission. And a lot of these people would start to develop a relationship with people of the opposite gender in these groups and organizations. And at that point, there were a lot of people who started leaving their husbands and wives and either choosing to remain single or marrying other men and women from these groups who were also leaving their husbands and wives. I mean, this was just prevalent. I don't think people realize the scale of this, the magnitude that it reached. But this was a common thing. I have heard story after story after story. I've observed it myself. I've talked to people myself who are still a part of these groups and organizations and still fully support them and believe all of this. So clearly you can see the author of all of this. All of these groups and organizations that seem to be all throughout Utah and Idaho are all kind of doing the same thing. They might be going about it a little bit differently, but they're all connected. They all share common beliefs. And we talked about a lot of those red flags in my past video messages between October and December. But a lot of those they're preaching multiple probations. They're preaching that false doctrine that they have had multiple lives on the earth before. Pretty much reincarnation. And a lot of these people truly, truly believe that they were someone very prominent in a past life, whether it was a past prophet or the wife of a prophet or the mother of a prophet. They believe that they were someone very important and very special, and that they were saved to be here in the very last day to do some very important work, to be on some very important errand for the Lord, some very important mission that they must do anything and everything possible to succeed at, even if that means leave your husband, leave your wife, leave your children, allow your family to be destroyed. It doesn't matter to them because they believe that they're someone else. They believe that when they pass away, they'll go back to being that prophet or that prophet's wife, and that's their real family. And it's just so bizarre. It really is just so nuts. But they are so passionate about this. They believe this so much that they're willing to do anything, even if it takes away the life of another. A lady in my ward reached out to me and said, you know what? I used to live in the same ward with Chad Daybell and his wife. And it was several years ago. And I remember going to girls' camp with his wife. We both served together. She would always talk about her husband and say, oh, he has these amazing spiritual gifts. He's had them forever, and he can do so many amazing things. He has all these encounters and experiences from beyond the veil, but he has these gifts. And she said the gifts that she described I had never heard of before, and they were really unusual. And it kind of was a red flag for me. And so I responded back to her and said, by any chance, was he channeling spirits from the other side and saying they were former prophets and leaders and whatnot? And she wrote back and she said, yes. How did you know that? And I said, well, I just figured, because that's a common pattern I've been seeing and talking about in my videos of all of these groups, is they have this gift where they channel, just like Abraham Hicks and the Course for Miracles people, where they allow entities to enter into their body and speak through them. So they'll go into this meditative state, and then other energy, spirits, whatever they call it, enters into their body, and suddenly, their eyes change, their mannerisms change, their voice changes, suddenly their voice is deep and they're a man. Or if they're a man, suddenly their voice is higher and they're a woman, and there's a woman speaking through them, and it's the mother of Jesus, Joan of Arc, people like that, people throughout history. And what we're seeing here is those familiar spirits and those deceptive spirits who are working through these people to bring about the plans of the enemy. He is the author of all of this chaos and confusion. We can clearly see his print on all of this. You think straight is kind of boring. If I'm on this straight, narrow path, it's so narrow and straight, I feel so restricted. But when I veer off down these other, less familiar paths that have less people going down them, they're more fun and more exciting. I'm having experiences I've never had before, and I never know where it's going to turn or go, and that's the exciting part of it, and it feels so good, and I'm experiencing new places I've never been before, and this is also exhilarating and wonderful, and I'm meeting all these new friends along the way. But see, as you're going that way, you're getting further and further and further from the straight and narrow path. Eventually, you're so far gone, you can't even see this path in the distance, and you can't even see how you'd ever get back to it. And that's the plan. That's the way the adversary wants it. He shows us things that are exciting and alluring and so different and fun and wonderful, and he's always dangling that bait in front of us to pull us further and further along. And sometimes we're so focused on the bait that's dangling on that hook, we're not even paying attention to the person who's holding the fishing pole. He puts a lot of truth out there. He'll share science with you, he'll share facts with you, he'll share with you things that are true. He'll even share scriptures and quotes from prophets and doctrines, things that we believe. But once he starts to pull you in and you start to get comfortable and you let your defenses down and you start to open up more, that's when he slides in those small lies and those small deceptions. And if we start going down that path long enough, when you're exposed to deception so long over a period of time, eventually you become immune to it. Behold, verily I say unto you, that there are many spirits which are false spirits, which have gone forth in the earth deceiving the world. And also Satan hath sought to deceive you, that he might overthrow you. Behold, I the Lord have looked upon you, and have seen abominations in the church that profess my name. But woe unto them that are deceivers and hypocrites. For thus saith the Lord, I will bring them to judgment. Behold, verily I say unto you, there are hypocrites among you, who have deceived some, which has given the adversary power. But behold, such shall be reclaimed. But the hypocrite shall be detected, and shall be cut off. They shall be excommunicated from the church, either in life or in death, even as I will. And woe unto them who are cut off from my church, for the same are overcome of the world. So he's saying these are people that have been overcome by the world. They have given in to the false teachings of the world, the pleasures of the world, the knowledge of the world. They have been overcome by it, and they are choosing that over the truth. And they're leading so many others away with their deceptions. Wherefore, let every man beware, lest he do that which is not in truth and righteousness before me. So these are some red flag words that I have noticed are a big part of this world again, that's full of illusion, delusion, and deception. Equal energy exchange, ascension, channeling. Now in a little bit I'm going to talk more about this channeling. Multiple lives. Now I noticed just about all of the people who were angry at me and who were attacking me with all kinds of anger-filled comments were Latter-day Saint energy healers. Women. This really struck a chord with them, and it made them very angry. And those who were reaching out to me personally, as kind as I tried to be to them, the angrier it made them. My husband saw what they were writing me, and he said, that's bullying, that's abuse. These people are bullying you, they're abusing you. This isn't right. And I actually had to block some people. I had to block them completely off of Facebook because it got to be so bad. But through this experience, I got to see their true colors. It's like the sheep's clothing came off a lot of people who followed my channel, who participated in my groups, who at one time really liked me and really liked my messages and shared them with everyone. And now they were seeing me as an enemy, wanting nothing to do with me or my messages. And again, that was another witness to not only me, but so many people, what spirit they are operating in. It's not the spirit of the Lord. That's what they are caught up in. Another experience I just wanted to share real quick. Around this time, there was a woman, I'm not going to say her name, but she has since been excommunicated from the church. And this was when she was first up and coming. She had released some books. She's big into energy healing, and so she was asked to be the keynote speaker at this conference. And I remember when I first heard about her, because she was all the talk and everybody went out and got her book, and I was into near-death experience books. This was something similar to that, so I went and got her book. And I remember as I read it, I didn't feel anything. And I thought that was really strange that all these people were making such a big deal out of this book, saying it was so amazing, everyone needs to read it, it's about the last days, and this woman's prophecy and visions. And I remember I read it, and I didn't feel anything. So I remember we all going to this room, and she was late. She wouldn't come, and we waited, and it was really strange. People didn't know what was going on. And I remember her publisher used to be my first publisher. And I ended up paying to get out of that publishing contract, and I became a self-publisher after that. But he was my first publisher. So he was there, and I was talking to him. This is strange. What's going on? And he was like, well, she's under attack from the adversary. Like, Satan is really attacking her. He doesn't want her to speak today. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, well, maybe she's sharing something really important. This is strange. And so I remember as we were all sitting in this room, to pass the time, they asked us to start singing hymns. So we started singing hymns at this conference, and it was hymn after hymn after hymn after hymn, and we're starting to wonder, is this ever going to happen? And then I remember she came into the room, and I just remember it was so dramatic. And I remember she couldn't stand, and she kept falling. She was talking all over the place. Her sentences were slurred as though she was drunk. You couldn't understand what she was saying. She wasn't making any sense. Her eyes were kind of closed. She didn't seem to be alert. And I kept thinking, she's either possessed, she's drunk, or she's mentally ill, or she's extremely physically ill right now, and she's on some kind of powerful medication or some kind of a drug. And it just was not normal behavior. Her sentences were all over the place, and she was swaying and tipping over and falling down and crawling on the floor, and it was so dramatic, and people were looking around feeling really weirded out. This is the keynote speaker that so many people came to see, spent a lot of money buying tickets to see this person speak, and this is what we were getting. And I remember after that, when people would reach out to me and say, what do you think about this person? Do you follow her? Do you like her books? I'm just starting to follow her. I love her. What do you think? I just would simply say, well, she's not for me. She's not for me. She's not for me. I mentioned that all these things I've been discovering reminds me of an NBC Dateline episode or a 2020 special. And so I had messaged that to some friends as well. And one of them responded and said, interesting that you said a 2020 special, considering the year that we're going into, 2020. Just a reminder that all of these wolves in sheep's clothing are being exposed by the end of the year to prepare for that new perfect vision for 2020. All right, so now with the last video message, here's what I said. Take a listen. I believe this will be as close as we get to civil war since the 1800s, since Abraham Lincoln's Civil War. And I've just been thinking that a lot lately. I just keep thinking about Abraham Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln. In fact, just today when I was at the nursery, I was looking for tomatoes, and look at one of the very first tomatoes I see is the Abraham Lincoln tomato. Oh my goodness, look at that. There it is again. I'm seeing his name everywhere. The Civil War. You had the North versus the South. You had the South that was for slavery and the North that was against slavery, that wanted freedom. It's no different than it is today. We have the right who wants to protect the Constitution, who wants to keep our freedoms and not be enslaved to a government. And then you have the left who wants to enact policies and laws that are designed to enslave us to the government. And it's interesting because I even thought about during the Civil War, it was the Democratic Party that was for slavery. They were the South. It was the new Republican Party that was for freedom, that was against slavery. It's almost exactly what we're experiencing right now. It's like those old beliefs and the ideology hasn't changed much. It hasn't left that party. There is this focus on division, us versus them, just like how it was in the South, black versus white. Everything had to be segregated. There was no unity. I really believe that this fall, with everything that's already been happening this year and things that still have yet to happen, I believe this will be as close as we get to civil war since the 1800s, since Abraham Lincoln's Civil War. And I've just been thinking that a lot lately. I just keep thinking about Abraham Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln. Now, I had no idea right after I published that video that things would happen as they have happened and as quickly as they have happened. I said that before the incident with George Floyd had even happened. I really thought we'd get somewhat of a break this summer, that we'd have just a little bit of peace and quiet, just a little bit of normalcy before things would start to really escalate and get out of control. But as we've seen, that's already happened. A fire has been started and it's burning all over the world. So the day that this started going down where I live in Utah, just down in Salt Lake, we were watching it live on TV as it was happening, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
We're starting to take it seriously now. I heard on the news recently is the cop who did this is now in custody. Why does it take so much of us to stand up for that to be done? That should be done in the first place. It shouldn't take all these people to do this, but when it comes to it, we have the right to do so.
I don't know if you guys can still hear me. I don't know if we're still on air, but this is what we're seeing right now on the steps of the Capitol.
Yeah, now we're starting to see dozens of police cars starting to arrive here at Library Square, trying to get a little organized. And you're starting to see some protesters who had left the area. Yeah, let's stay here, Jay. They're starting to come back, and in fact, over here, there's this police officer who's just putting on his gear now. He's now hiding underneath the tailgate of his car because there was a rock thrown in his direction that just missed him, and it kind of whizzed by. He immediately got behind his car because he was almost hit in the head by that rock or a bottle, whatever it is, to advance that line to trying to clear protesters. But you saw when a couple of the officers had to shove people to get them out of the way. One woman fell down. Now you're starting to hear some screaming from people, and that's where that's starting to really upset the crowd, because now
then you're gonna see, they're gonna show this footage of the woman on the ground, and it's gonna be all over the news, like police beat up woman.
They're not even touching.
Oh, they won't show that, they'll just show an image.
And now police officers with their shields are physically going forward.
She's getting paid to make front page headlines. She's in on this. She's getting paid.
Kick a police officer. Yeah, this is.
They should just ignore her.
Police is not even doing much.
She's trying to be a victim. Someone's paid her to cause a scene, and she's frustrated.
Here we go. There goes the guy.
Bottles and glass. A little bit of everything. So Jay,
they're probably like, let's get this ended before it's dark outside. Let's get this shut down before
This will go all night.
Oh, I know.
Police officers here are advancing their line. So these are police officers here.
Did you know they blamed Trump for all of this already? The day that guy was killed by the police officer, they said it was because of Trump.
And traffic here, regular people who are just coming through this area, I mean, it is at a standstill. It is kind of complete mayhem out here as people are turning around on 400 South and trying to just get out of the area and head the other way. So, yeah, a lot more people have started to arrive this way, Dan and Lori, simply because they're starting to hear that this is where the police officers are. And these frontline officers here are getting pelted with debris, Dan and Lori.
Alex, just a quick question. Is the intersection, well, that looks at a complete standstill. Is 400...
Make sure you being in that car. You didn't know it was there. You didn't know anything like this was happening.
You just drove right into it.
You're not caught into this, and they might be turning over your car next. Who knows?
Traffic's still moving.
It's awful.
On the north side.
No, traffic. No. On the other side here, the traffic. I mean, people are trying to get.
Look, at least everybody's leaving the Capitol now.
We They're jumping on his vehicle. They're punching this man. He had a bow and arrow in his hands a moment ago. I saw him pull out the bow. I don't know if he used it towards somebody, but I can't tell you he was attacked. He was being punched. An entire group of people jumped on top of him. Police have now made their way. Here he is walking across. Police are escorting him out of the area. He has a bow and arrow in his hand.
Resisted.
He had some sort of crossbow, it looks like. You hope at this point police would get him out of here. As things start to escalate in this area of 400 South and 200 East, the police are trying to pull him back. As this crowd yells at him and he's yelling back, he's bleeding. We have a vehicle that's also in the street that is damaged. People are jumping on it. They're jumping on his vehicle and they're smashing the windows. I don't know if that's his vehicle, but the vehicle that he was next to. And here it goes again. It's escalating as we ramp up here. Protesters are jumping on the vehicle. They're smashing it with skateboards right now.
Gabe missing all.
And
It looks like they're attempting to try to flip it, but they're throwing things. Sean, back up. Back up, back up, back up. Back up, back up.
We were supposed to watch a movie that night as a family, and my husband and I said, well, we guess this is our movie. It was like watching a train wreck. It was horrible to watch, but you couldn't look away. As things just kept getting worse and worse, I started to say to my husband, I don't think this is really about what we're being told it's about. And I don't think that the majority of these people, this is because history repeats itself. We've learned from the past. We've learned from the last decade that this happens all the time. People are brought in from out of state to cause trouble, stir up contention in certain cities for certain agendas. I could feel that's what this was. Salt Lake isn't an angry place. I mean, we've never seen anything like this before. It really felt that there was more to this, that more people were behind this, because it was so unbelievable, and especially the way it happened so fast. Suddenly we noticed on the radar that this huge storm was about to roll in right into Salt Lake. It was just 30 minutes away. Here's the footage I saw live on TV as it was happening in my living room. So as you can see, 30 minutes into all of this, the storm rolls in. We got some crazy wind. I filmed it, but then it passed on. So I don't think the purpose of it was to put a stop to this. I think it was a manifestation that Satan and all of his forces just rolled into town. Darkness is here. And we've seen this happening all throughout the week. I'm going to share more in a minute. And I really thought at first, well, maybe that's some divine intervention right there and it will break things up. But then I thought, no, maybe these people need to exercise their agency and show the world what's really in their hearts so that they can be held accountable. Then I had the thought that maybe this storm rolling in was a manifestation in the physical of what's happening in the spiritual. And I saw that pattern throughout the days following. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But every time we had some major, crazy event that created anger and contention and chaos, a storm would follow that. It's like the storm was manifesting in the physical what's happening in the spiritual. That spiritual battle of good versus evil is being played out in the physical right before our eyes. And we're seeing a manifestation of that in the weather, in events that are happening all around the world. So while this was happening, I was keeping notes in my phone. And I'm just going to kind of go in order of my thoughts and then bring it all together. But I started out with a focus on Minnesota right after the George Floyd incident. And I noted that, incidents happen every day all over the country between law enforcement and citizens. Sometimes it's the citizens that are being unfairly treated, harassed, or abused. Sometimes it's Black citizens, sometimes it's white citizens, sometimes it's Hispanic citizens, and sometimes it's police officers who are being attacked. We've all seen some pretty bad stuff go down over the years in the news related to law enforcement and citizens. Like I said, whether it was the citizens who were being harmed or law enforcement who was being harmed. And now I want to say, in instances where the citizens have been harmed, we've seen white cops harming black citizens, but we've also seen black cops harming black citizens, or black cops with white citizens, and of course white cops with white citizens. So we've seen it with all races. And many of these incidents are clearly wrong, clearly unjust, and extremely disheartening. And when an incident happens, the citizens in that city where the incident took place usually will raise their voice and express their anger and frustration. Families will seek justice. A lot of times it will make national headlines, and these families of these victims will get even more support. Most of the time, not all of the time, justice is eventually served. With the George Floyd case, of course, it was an incident that was extremely disturbing, extremely disheartening. The officers involved were arrested. Right away, President Trump jumped on this and opened up an investigation. The right actions were taking place to get the ball of justice rolling. But despite all of that, this incident turned into a civil war, starting in Minneapolis, quickly spreading out through all of America, and now spreading all around the world. Now, my thoughts as this was happening have clearly been the thoughts of many other Americans as well. I'm not the only one thinking and feeling this way, but clearly the media wants us to think and wants the world to think that this one incident represents all of America. They're trying to send the message loud and clear that America is divided. Racially, politically, economically, religiously, in pretty much every way. Not only are they trying to tell us that we're more divided than we've ever been before, they're trying to tell us we're more racially divided than we've ever been before. We are all racist. Part of their message and agenda is they want us to know that cops are the bad guys and they can't be trusted. They're trying to get all of America and countries all around the world to lose trust in the police, to lose trust in law enforcement. So why do they want us to believe this? What is the agenda? Well, for starters, they want us to say, America is really scary. It feels really dangerous. Things are really unstable. So as we're getting this negative image of our country, of our nation, we realize that elections are starting to come up and we think, I'm not really enjoying my life right now. In fact, I haven't enjoyed any of 2020 so far. Who's president right now, right? When I think of who the current president is, I attach him to these negative feelings I have about this year and everything that's going on because he's the one who's in the White House. So maybe this coming election, if I vote for someone different, I'll be voting for something different. And if I vote for something different, then we might get change. Yes, we would get change, but that doesn't mean positive change. This is how I was feeling in the moment as these events were rolling out live in front of me on TV. And clearly, most of America feels the same way. We feel that there's a bigger agenda to all of this. It's no surprise that it's happening during an election year, during one of the most important election years in American history. We've seen that the left has tried to take out the president so many times with so many different schemes, and they've been unsuccessful every single time. This is just another scheme, and when this doesn't work, you're going to see another scheme and another scheme until they reach that final moment of desperation and anything is possible. But another point I want to make with this is that when you have a country who's constantly living in fear and uncertainty, and they feel that this is a scary place to be living in, when they get tired enough and fed up enough with all the restrictions that are happening, all the rights that are being stripped away, all the freedoms that are being stripped away, that combined with the fear will cause the people to say, do something. Government, we need you to step in. We need you to do something. And that's when the government says, okay, we'll step in. And because as a people, we're so desperate and we're so tired, we just want some change, we just want some peace of mind, We go along with whatever they decide to change, with whatever they decide to implement, whatever things they decide to do away with, whatever new laws they decide to implement. We just go along with it because we're just tired. We just want peace. We're done. We want to be saved. And all throughout history, we've seen time and time again that when this happens, it's the perfect setup for rolling in a dictatorship. It's the perfect setup for rolling out communism. Right after the George Floyd incident happened, I just knew, well, they're gonna blame Trump for this. They always do. And just moments later, headlines started to read that President Trump was responsible for this, that he was responsible for dividing Americans. He was responsible for racial tensions. He's responsible for the riots. He's responsible for the deaths. He's responsible for all of it. Then they started censoring his tweets about it. Right about this time, I saw several celebrities publicly announcing that they would be willing to personally pay for and fund any rioters or protesters who end up in jail. They would be willing to pay their bail out of jail. So they were saying, we're relying on you. We need the people to rise up, to speak out, to stir things up, cause chaos, cause problems in the streets, because we need to be heard. We need to get their attention so that change can happen. We need you to not be afraid. Go out into the streets, riot, cause problems. And we will personally pay for your bail should you get arrested for your behaviors and actions. When I saw that, I guess I should say I wasn't surprised, but nonetheless, still disappointed. And the thought came, who's encouraging these celebrities to make these statements? Who's behind all of this? I think a lot of us know the answer to that. As I was watching this all happen, I started to think about in my mind how this was a repeat of just a few years ago. This happened in the year 2016. What else was happening in 2016? An election. A very important election because President Trump was running. Again, a rogue president who wasn't answering to anyone but the people who voted him in, who didn't have his own agenda, and nobody was pulling his strings. That was an important election, and the left knew it. So we're seeing a repeat of history. Then this week, we get news that Minneapolis has disbanded their police department. They have no more police force. As of so far, the citizens are going to be left to fend for themselves until something else is put into place. But they're saying, you know what, because we've had such a bad history with the police department here, because we've had a bad relationship with them, it's best just to get rid of the police department altogether. We don't need to have the police. We'll let our citizens come up with something. We'll let our citizens take care of that. And again, that poses so many more problems, and again is the perfect storm for more crime, more chaos, more mob activity when you don't have a police force to come in and enforce safety. When you leave it up to the citizens, well, that's how you get a civil war. Before this happened, I said to my husband, I just get the feeling they're trying to get rid of the police. See, because if they just came in one day and got rid of law enforcement here in America, that wouldn't go over so well. But if they make the people believe, the citizens of the land believe that it was their idea, that they're supporting this because they're angry and they've lost all faith and trust in the police, they can convince them that it's their idea, that this is a good thing, this is what they want. And that's how they're able to do it, in broad daylight. So I said to my husband, I think they're trying to get rid of the police. Again, I talked about in my last video, before any of this had even happened, what took place during World War II Nazi Germany. How they had the people in a place of so much mistrust with each other that they believed the lie and they were willing to let someone come in and completely transform their country for the worse. And the more that things changed, the higher the fear level rose. People began to be even more afraid of their neighbors, of the Gestapo. Hitler was able to make his own radical changes with the police all throughout Germany. He assigned Heinrich Himmler to revamp the police force. And revamp he did. And I saw that that's what's trying to be done here in America. Someone wants to get rid of the police force, and they want to implement their own law enforcement. They wouldn't be able to get away with those things with the current law enforcement. So if they eradicate the law enforcement that we have now, and they implement something new, and they have us believe that it's our idea, it's something we wanted, that we raised our hand for because we just want to feel safe. We just want to get back that trust again and have peace of mind. Then they can radically change America overnight, just like that. They didn't invent this game plan. This strategy has happened time and time again all throughout world history, and it works. Now within Minnesota, there has been record gun sales. What does that tell you? That the people aren't feeling safe. They feel like they have to take matters into their own hands for their own safety, security, and peace of mind. They've already lost that trust. And what happens when a society doesn't feel safe? Tensions begin to rise. It's the perfect setup for a civil war. Personally, I feel like that civil war is already happening. And maybe the feeling that I had about this fall is that civil war reaching its peak, reaching its climax. So we're just seeing the beginning of it right now. We're seeing the beginning phases, the little triggers, the little fires that are starting to set everyone off. Because I don't know about you, but the difference with this year and all the other years in the past is it always felt like to me that in the past, I would point things like this out in my videos, share things on Facebook, and a lot of people would say, oh, I've never thought about that before, or I've never heard of that before. But now, in the year 2020, we're all concluding the same things. We're all getting the same feelings. The minute a news story breaks out, right away, we see what's going on. We don't even have to go on Facebook or to a podcast to develop our own conclusions about what's going on. Instantly, we get what's going on. Instantly, we have that feeling. We just know. And that's the difference. And so what's the purpose of a civil war? So the civilians can battle it out together, so that they can destroy each other, so that you have so much chaos and violence and unrest that the only way to solve it is for a third party to come in and break it up. Whether that third party is someone outside of the United States, whether that third party is an internal organization, such as the deep state, regardless of who it is, the fact is that it takes a third party to come in and break things up. Because if you leave it up to the citizens, then you only get a resolution when someone gives up. When so many people have been killed, they just raise the white flag and say, we're done. So you let it get to that point, or you let a third party come in and resolve it for you. And what people have been pointing out about this with these riots is they don't know whose side anyone's on. They're afraid to just go out at night. They're afraid to be seen in the streets because I've watched a lot of videos of black people saying, you know what, I'm against the riots, but because I'm black, if I go out at night, or even if I go out during the day, people assume that I'm for Black Lives Matter, that I'm for these riots, and my life can be in danger. Or when the rioters find out that I'm not on their side, again, my life can be in danger. So we've seen in a lot of these riots, people killing their own people. People killing people on their side. Just because there's so much chaos and contention and anger that people just start going crazy on everyone around them. And as this escalates, it quickly turns into mob rule. Every man for himself. But as people begin to quickly realize that letting the mob sort these things out is rather violent, rather deadly. So they'll complain about the violence, they'll complain about the deaths, they'll ask the government to step in and do something, and the government will say, okay, how about we take away guns? But again, they spin it in a way so that it's the citizens' idea. So it's the citizens who are saying, yeah, that's a great idea. That's what we want. If that means peace and safety, let's do it. So again, then you're setting up the perfect storm here. You have no law enforcement, you have mob rule, you have violence and unrest, and then you take away the people's guns. You take away their means of defense and protection. But the government's saying, look, you're safer with no police. Because the police were the bad guys, so we got rid of them for you so that you could be safer. And you're safer because there's no guns. We got rid of the guns so you could have peace of mind. So you have no one enforcing the laws. You have no means of defense and protection. No way for the people to defend themselves. And that creates a smooth transition, complete control. That's how we lose our freedom overnight. It's when people feel helpless and fearful that they allow. They make exceptions. But so many of us are noticing that ever since these riots, more Black people are dying in America than ever before because of the riots. So they're having the opposite effect that they were supposed to have. And we were all watching it happen in real time live on our TVs. We were watching Black people screaming Black Lives Matter, break into stores owned by Black business owners, loot and steal and destroy everything, and even violently hurt these Black business owners in the process. We've also seen Black citizens in their communities coming in the next day to help clean up the mess, and the Black protesters and rioters showing up again and hurting the citizens of their communities, holding up guns to them and threatening them because they're trying to help clean it up. So you have one side who wants to improve their communities, protect their communities, and save everything because Black Lives Matter, because they're important. Then you have the other side who wants to destroy everything, tear it down, watch it burn, and kill others in the process for the same motive because Black Lives Matter. And you have everyone standing around watching this, just scratching their head. You know, what is going on here? You have mayors of major cities, like the mayor of New York City, encouraging this behavior, promoting it, praising his daughter for being a part of it, encouraging destruction of his own city. And I've heard so many different perspectives on this from the Black community. I've heard some people say, you know what? Yeah, I have had negative experiences throughout my life with law enforcement because I'm Black. I've had very negative traumatic experiences in moments where I didn't do anything wrong. And so I'm terrified. You know, I feel limited because of the color of my skin. I can't go out at night because I run the risk of being pulled over because I'm Black. And there's certain things I can't do and at certain times of day because of the color of my skin, because I just want to play it safe. I just want to be able to come home to my family at the end of the day. I've heard this from Black men and Black women. But then I also hear Black men and Black women saying the opposite, saying, I've never had a problem with this. I've never had negative experiences with police officers. I don't feel underprivileged because of the color of my skin. I've had a great life. I've had lots of opportunities. And so they express frustration and disagreement towards their fellow Black brothers and sisters who are saying the opposite. And as I got thinking about this, I thought, well, a lot of this has to do with your own life experiences, where you grew up, where you were raised, how you were raised, what your culture and community was like, what your parents taught you. Just because a group of people shares the same color of skin doesn't mean they grew up having the same life experiences. And because of that, it makes every one of them unique. All of us are unique. None of us grew up the same way. None of us have had the same life experiences. So we all see the world through a filter, through a lens, based on our own experiences, based on what's happened to us. So that's what I gathered from all of this is when people speak up and try to represent one whole community based on their own prejudices or negative experiences, that doesn't always go well with that whole community. And they say, don't speak for me. I don't support what you're doing. I don't agree with what you're saying. That's not how I feel. So don't speak for me. So you have turmoil and clashing and division happening within the Black community. And then you have white people who are watching this happen and feeling really bad and saying, well, I feel like I need to do something because I feel really bad. I feel for the most part my life's been pretty easy. I have a lot of blessings. I have what others are calling white privilege, and so I feel bad. I feel kind of guilty. I need to step in and do something. And then you have many in the Black community who are saying, don't feel bad. We don't want you to step in and do anything. You don't need to. This is all a lie, and you're just feeding the lie and making it worse when you do that. You have nothing to apologize for. You never owned slaves, and I've never been a slave. So we're good. I've heard members of the Black community say, well, white people probably feel bad because of what their ancestors did. And as I got thinking about that, I thought, well, That's not necessarily true for a lot of people in the white community. My ancestors immigrated to the United States after the Civil War. They came here when there was no slavery, and they came to Utah. I have one line in the family tree who was here during the time of the Civil War, and they actually fought for the North. So they were very much anti-slavery. They fought for freedom. So that's what's in my family tree, and I know that's what's in a lot of other people's family trees. And this is why many are saying you have nothing to be ashamed of, you have nothing to apologize for, because you're not responsible for anything that happened in the past. You weren't even born. It's not even in your family tree. It's not in your history. Then you have other people in the community who say, no, this has been going on for hundreds of years. It's never been made right, and someone needs to finally pay and make this right. And so there's so much confusion going on because there's so many different conversations that are happening, so many different voices, so many different perspectives and views, and no matter what you share on social media, someone is always going to disagree and be offended. Doesn't matter which point of view you have or how you're trying to help or make it better, there's always going to be someone who's offended and disagrees with your stance or what you're trying to do or your perspective. You see some people staying completely silent because they just don't want to get involved because they're seeing what's happening. And then you have other people who feel out of frustration they have to say something because they're tired of seeing this happening. Then you have the people who just want to feel good and do something right because they feel bad. And so you see them getting involved. And so there's just so much going on. It's just unlike anything I've ever seen before. It reminded me of back when I was in college and I had a class. I was going into social work and I had a class in my program. I can't remember the name of the class, but I had a black professor. And I remember he would always talk really negative about white people, but especially white women. Every day he would go off on a rant about white women, and he'd always look at me, and I always felt bad. And there were days where I felt bad being a white woman, and he would talk about how angry it would make him when he would see these white families adopting black children because these white women didn't know the proper way to take care of black children, especially girls. They didn't know how to do their hair because they weren't raised in that culture. He didn't like how they were trying to turn these children white, according to him. And he would go off on these rants every day. And it wasn't until his class in college that I started to really notice skin color as an issue. And now you have people who say it's offensive to say that you're colorblind. They want you to see their color, but recognize that it's beautiful. Then you have people who think that it's wrong to say you're white, you're black. They want you to be colorblind and not even address it at all. So many people in America are confused. They don't know what's right and what's wrong. They don't know what's proper and what's not proper, what's politically correct and what's not politically correct. And I remember prior to college, we were always taught to call black people African American because we were taught if you call someone black, that's rude, it's offensive. So the more proper term was African American, but that you needed to address that that's who they were, that someone was either white or they were African American. And I used to think, well, then why aren't we called European Americans, right? Or wherever our ancestors come from, why are we Americans or white Americans and they're African Americans? I never thought that made sense. And then when I got into his class in college, he told us how terrible that was. And he said, don't ever call us African Americans because a lot of us aren't from Africa. Our ancestors came from Jamaica or Haiti. We have no connections to Africa whatsoever, so that's offensive. He said, call us black. That's what we want to be called. He got us practicing that and saying that, and his focus was always on social injustice. And so I remember thinking, okay, I've been doing it wrong all this time. I'm supposed to refer to everyone as white people and black people. But then later in my life, I came across people who were offended by that and said, don't call me black, don't see my color, I'm just a person, don't call me anything. And I think a lot of us feel this way. We're just so confused. We don't know what's right and what's wrong, what's offensive, what's not offensive, what's proper, what's not proper, and people are just afraid. They're just getting to a point where they're so uncomfortable, they just want to stay in their house. And so I've heard this from the Black community. I've heard people saying, we don't want white people to feel this way. We don't want you to feel so confused and so uncomfortable that you can't come talk to us and you can't be our friends. And that's what we feel the Black Lives Matter movement is doing. We feel it's causing further division, more discomfort. It's doing more harm than good, and we have nothing to do with it. Of course, you have people that are talking about who it is that's funding Black Lives Matter, and that right there tells you who supports it. Then you have your people that are saying all lives matter. Why are we just focusing on one race, one group of people? All lives matter. If we see injustice happening to anyone, we should all stand up for each other. And then you have white people and Black people being offended at that and saying, no, we're focusing on Black lives because that's the issue in America right now. We can't skirt around the issue. We can't ignore it. We have to face it. So you have so many people arguing with each other. You have celebrities who support Black Lives Matter, who tweet things or come out and say things hoping that it's going to do some good. And people on their own team end up getting offended by them and blacklisting them and bullying them. You have these white celebrities that are trying to show their support and do something that makes them feel good. And it backfires on them every time. And then the Black community says, we don't like what you're doing. And who are you to have a voice in this matter? Because you're not Black. You're not the victim. And we're just seeing everybody bully everybody. It seems to be that most of these celebrities that are getting flack from the Black community are liberal celebrities. Here's a perfect example of Democratic politician Nancy Pelosi and her fellow politicians wearing African garb from the Ashanti Tribe of Africa. And this, of course, caused a big uproar in the Black community because they said, she doesn't even know what these colors and patterns represent. They mean something. And not only that, but they were saying she probably also isn't aware that the Ashanti Tribe represents a history of slavery in Africa. The Ashanti people were a part of the transatlantic slave trade. And according to the Wikipedia, slaves were captured by the Ashantis and sold to the British and the Dutch along the coasts and sent to the West Indies. And on the website, answersafrica.com, it says that slaves could also be used for sacrifice during funeral ceremonies. And when this all started happening in a lot of these videos, Black business owners were being looted and vandalized. I was seeing video after video after video of Black women. I was seeing all these women come out and just raise their voices and just put everyone in their place. It was like these fearless Black women just coming out, just trying to smack sense into all of these kids. I want to call them kids, these young millennial kids. And you have all these Black women coming out and they're trying to smack sense into all these young people and saying, look what it is you're doing. Your actions don't match your message. Your actions don't match what it is you're trying to say. You're contradicting yourself. You're being hypocrites. But I was seeing these women rise up in this righteous anger, like just saying this has to stop, no more. I thought it was interesting that it was women. I just kept seeing woman after woman after woman after woman. I thought, where are all the men business owners? Is there a reason they're only showing women? Really interesting. And then everything still going on with COVID-19. You have your mask people and your non-mask people. You have your fearful people and your non-fearful people. And that's creating division as well. That's creating so much division right now. And as I've been thinking about this, I couldn't help but think I wouldn't be surprised if the people who are over all of this, who are in the shadows pulling all the strings, making all of this happen, because this is all a part of the master plan, right? I wouldn't be surprised if these people are feeding fuel to both sides. They're feeding the flames on both sides, because if they just focused on the left and got those people angry and lit a fire in them and just got those people angry, you can't really have a civil war when you just have one side that's angry, passionately angry. But you can have a civil war when you have two sides that are equally angry. I wouldn't be surprised if they're spewing articles and headlines and messages through the media that speaks to both sides of the aisle, that speaks to both parties, that speaks to the right and the left. I wouldn't be surprised if they're speaking the right's language under the guise of being people on the right themselves, and stirring up more rumors and more fear to get that side angry, and then of course doing the same thing on the left. stirring up rumors and fear to get that side angry, because I can't tell you how many times every day I get message after message after message and text after text and email after email of people saying, have you seen this? Have you heard of this? Have you seen this? And there are all these videos and short messages of people saying, I just heard this, and no one's talking about this, but you need to be aware of this, or this is the most important video you'll ever watch. You watch it and you resonate with it. You connect with the person in the video. You feel their hurt. You feel their anger, and you start to feed into that. And I just see it happening on the right and on the left. And so again, I wouldn't be surprised if the people at the top, the masterminds of all of this, who are pulling the strings and moving the pawns, if they're not purposely delivering rumors to both sides of the aisle to get them both angry at each other. I wouldn't be surprised one bit. Now, why would they be doing this? Because divided we fall. They know that. They don't want us to be the United States of America. They want us to be the divided states of America, so that they can create a new America. Maybe even give it a new name. Who knows? But again, we're continuing to see that censorship increase. We're all feeling it. YouTube continues to disable all comments on my videos, and sometimes it'll slip through the cracks and I'll publish a new video and suddenly you can comment, and all of a sudden I'll get 10, 12, 13 comments rolling in, and then all of a sudden someone shuts off my comments. So again, they're silencing the community of my channel. They're silencing all of your voices. They're trying to stop us from having conversations about these topics. And it's been happening for about 1.5 years on my channel. Something else I noticed, I have some screenshots right here, is that anytime I try to Google a controversial topic, nothing comes up. I get crickets. Same if I go into YouTube. If I go into YouTube and I type in a fresh, hot, controversial topic or a new rumor that's going around, I can't find any videos on it. But if I go into a different search engine, if I go into Yahoo and I type in those same keywords for that same search, suddenly I get a whole bunch of news articles and videos that pop up. So yes, Google continues to heavily censor their platforms and search engines, and it's crazy to think we live in a world where this is happening. So a week ago, we had that historic rocket launch. Isn't it interesting that the day we have this huge, incredible event happening, a rocket launching into space, just moments after that, America is suddenly on fire and experiencing major civil unrest. And as I thought about that, it was clear that that was not a coincidence. My first thoughts were, well, they don't want President Trump to look good in any way. So if the headlines today are all about this historic, monumental, successful space launch and President Trump's speech that he gave that day that gives America hope, well, that would make President Trump look good. And they want to do everything they can right now to make him look bad because the elections are coming up. So it was no surprise to me that just moments after that happened, all of these riots broke out, and suddenly that monumental, historic, positive, successful event was swept under the rug, and this civil war and America on fire dominated the headlines and washed that positive story out. That seemed like a strategy. And of course, we did find out about 24 hours later that the majority of those rioters were hired people. I was sent many videos of news anchors interviewing the rioters and saying, why are you here? What's in this for you? Why are you doing this? And they said, I'm getting paid. You should do it too. One guy said, go to georgesoros.com and right on his website, it shows you how you can become a paid protester too. And you get a check signed by him. In fact, he said it's so easy. You just go onto his website and you send in your email and something comes back to you with the opportunity. He said it's set up like a pyramid scheme. So you get people to enroll under you. You go out and you recruit others, and the more people that sign up under you, the more you get paid. So you can see there's a great motivation for all these young people to go out and recruit people to join this because they get paid. Okay, so now let's talk about this week's screenshots, patterns, and numbers, because all of this plays right into what we're talking about. Now, a few people had sent this to me. This is an edited clip from a TV show that came out in the early 2000s. It was pretty early, I want to say 2002-ish. Anyways, I watched this and I shortened it down even more for the purpose of time in my video. But as I watched this, it really does parallel what we're experiencing today. So I had to share this with you and just wanted to get your thoughts as well. It's pretty interesting.
Virus? Like what? Like SARS?
I don't know. All I know is that it's highly infectious. It may be fatal. Right now, we could all be infected.
We need to make sure that everybody that's inside stays inside. I'm going to get a few deputies on it. We'll call it a lockdown.
Lockdown?
Well, until I come up with something better.
Maybe we should wear masks. What difference does it make? According to you, we've already been exposed. I'm responding to political pressure. We know it acts like a virus. It causes high fever and respiratory distress. Tracking and treating a mysterious outbreak like this would take the CDC months.
We better get started then. For anyone who hasn't been exposed already needs to wear a mask.
China. Isn't that where flu viruses come from?
Yeah. A lot of viruses come from there.
International flight to China?
That's no coincidence. Whatever it is, it originated in China.
Time is not on our side.
It's like looking for a needle in a needle stack.
We have ruled out all the usual suspects: influenza, SARS, bacterial pneumonia.
How long is it going to take?
Well, it took 34 days to isolate the coronavirus that caused SARS, and that's fast.
I'm authorizing a quarantine on everyone who's come in contact with a symptomatic person.
There's got to be something I can do.
On the enzyme, this virus is when they were using
So the chloroquine did
malaria.
So the chloroquine.
Chloroquine.
This is it. This is your virus.
I'm sorry, but there's no cure for that. Chloroquine, that's an anti-malarial drug.
No. Listen, it suppresses the enzymes.
What happened? We started everyone on chloroquine, stopped the thing dead in its tracks. Now, the CDC would have figured it out eventually, but not in time.
Now, did you catch what the cure was? Because if you did, it absolutely parallels today. It's as though somebody knew this way back then and they were preparing us. Here's a screenshot. It says, "Not a believer. Christian rock star makes shocking announcement about his faith." So I clicked on that because I was curious about what band this was, and it happens to be the lead singer of Hawk Nelson. I have their music on my phone. There's a song that they wrote that I absolutely love called "Drops in the Ocean." It's all about the Savior and his atonement and forgiveness. And here, the lead singer of this Christian band that's had major influence in the Christian world, the lead singer says he no longer believes in God. His father was a pastor of his church. So growing up, he was raised in a Christian family, and he's had such an influence on so many people all over the world. And now he's coming out to all of his fans saying, "I no longer believe in God." What does that do to the people who look up to him? We've seen that happen time and time throughout the scriptures, where people will come out and say, well, there is no God, so it's okay, as a means to justify their behavior so they don't have to feel guilty or be accountable. Because they say, well, if I don't believe in God, then I can't be accountable for this in the next life because I didn't believe. Anyways, I know that was pretty shocking in the Christian world, and it rocked the Christian music industry. A lot of people were talking about this. But again, if you don't have a firm testimony and a firm foundation in Jesus Christ, you won't be able to withstand these last days. The pressure will be too high. Fear will be too high. It will be easier to abandon your beliefs. But I love the way his bandmates responded. They said, "Our mission as Hawk Nelson has always been to inspire and encourage all people with the truth that God is for them and not against them. In that message's most simple and purest form, that they matter." So now we turn that truth towards one of our own, that God is still for John and he still matters. Why? Because that truth doesn't change just because we question it. Speaking of losing your faith, I saw this last night in a Facebook group and I took a screenshot. It says, "Today I was watching people in the canyon. They were burning their garments and taking pictures of the process." So again, people renouncing their faith, breaking their covenants, taking pictures of it, and then posting it on social media. We're going to talk more about broken covenants later on in this video. Here's a picture of the sky. There was a certain day that was pretty difficult, and my cute younger two kids came running in the house and said, "Mom, there's angels in the sky. Come out and see this." And I thought, oh, I need to see angels right now. That would really make my day. So I went out, we looked up at the sky, and there was this amazing picture in the sky. You can see right here where it looks like angel wings. It looks like angels flying in a row across the sky. And according to my kids, that's exactly what it was. These weren't clouds. They were angels flying over our house. Here's another headline that lots of people were sharing. It says, "The skies over Beijing turn black in the middle of the day as government passes new laws against Christians." Everything I'm sharing in this video, I have links to down below if you want to go check it out later. But as you can see, that's an eerie picture to have the sky turn black in the middle of the day, in the very moment you're passing laws that are against Christians. If that's not a sign, I don't know what is. It goes on to say, "The skies over Beijing turned dark and black in the middle of the day on Thursday as the Communist Party came together for an annual meeting." A lifelong Beijing resident described it in one report to the Epoch Times as an alarm from God. He said that there was thunder rolling, heavy wind blowing. The sky was very dark. I have never seen this in my life. Throughout this video, there's going to be lots of themes of weather and God speaking to us right now through the weather. Just the other night, we had a huge thunderstorm over the weekend. We were downstairs, we were watching a movie, and we just heard the thunder, saw the lightning, and my little boy Tatum said, "Mom, that's God speaking to us right now." And I said, well, we better listen. So it just seems to be this reoccurring theme and pattern. So back to this Communist Party, it says, "Their agenda is not looking good for Christians. News is leaking out of the meeting about new laws for the church. The government is drafting new plans to further persecute the underground house church. The details have not come out yet, but it seems that the current coronavirus epidemic is being used as a reason for the Communist Party to put even more pressure on the church than they have in the last 2 years. The thick, dark clouds that descended on Beijing on Thursday seemed to be like a supernatural sign that the forces of darkness had moved into the city." It was a manifestation of what's happening in the spiritual. I've noticed this week that there's been a lot of headlines about persecution again in the Christian church. This headline reads, "Christian pastor and pregnant wife killed in Nigeria." The article says, Hassa Christians Foundation called the killings part of a systematic direct war against Christianity in Nigeria and said that pastors, Christian leaders, and seminarians are either being kidnapped or killed every week in the country. Here's a screenshot completely separate of the story. It says smog enveloping Beijing. And I saw those numbers 111 and 311. This is a video from 3 years ago, but when you click on it, just really quickly you see this darkness just come rolling in all over Beijing, and it goes down through the city and it covers the road so you can't even see the cars on the freeway. There's just this heavy darkness. Here's some screenshots in relation to the protests and riots. It says this one here, "So smashing police cars will make everything better? They're not all the same. Imagine being actually a good cop and turning up there." Here's more screenshots I took throughout the week as this was all happening so quick. Every time something fresh, something new happened, I would hurry and screenshot it to keep track of it all so that I could process it. This one here, protests break out in Denver, Columbus, and Louisville. NBC allegedly tells reporters not to use the word riots in George Floyd coverage. They want them to be called protests, not riots. Steve Carell That's interesting because I talk about him in today's video message. He was in the movie Evan Almighty in regards to Noah and the flood. And I'll be making a reference to that movie here in just a minute. Steve Carell, Seth Rogers among Hollywood stars donating to bail out Minneapolis protesters. As always, Hollywood celebrities side with the left. They are funding violence and they are funding the destruction of the United States of America. CNN crew released from police custody after they were arrested live on the air in Minneapolis. Here was an article from an election year, 2016, July 11th, that says social media is dividing us more than connecting us. Can we stop this? Again, we're seeing a repeat of this. News articles in the media telling us that we're being divided, always during the year of an election. Let me rephrase that. Always during a year when Donald Trump is running for office. Someone posted this screenshot that says, Massachusetts bald eagle population soars. First nest found on Cape Cod in 150 years. I was asked for my opinion on this, and I said, the Pilgrims first landed in America on the tip of Lower Cape Cod before deciding to move along and settling at Plymouth. With this being the 400-year anniversary of that landing and the eagle representing America to the world, but representing freedom here in America, the bald eagle coming back is like hearing, freedom is coming back. There is a real fight for freedom happening right now. But we know, according to scriptures, freedom wins in the end. When every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus is the Christ, we will finally have freedom 100% restored. So I found this information, and it says, it is said that the eagle was used as a national emblem because at one of the first battles of the Revolution, which occurred early in the morning, the noise of the struggle awoke the sleeping eagles on the heights, and they flew from their nests and circled about over the heads of the fighting men, all the while giving vent to their raucous cries. They are shrieking for freedom, said the patriots. Thus the eagle, full of the boundless spirit of freedom, living above the valleys, strong and powerful in his might, has become the national emblem of a country that offers freedom in word and thought and an opportunity for a full and free expansion into the boundless space of the future. Here's a screenshot. It says, America on fire. U.S. braces for another night of unrest as protesters and police clash in major cities. You have people throwing Molotov cocktails at the police. You have a federal officer who is killed, another injured in an Oakland shooting. Minnesota governor authorizes full mobilization of the state's National Guard. So we start seeing the National Guard come out into the states. We saw it here in Utah to help restore peace. Then you had cities that didn't want the National Guard there. They didn't want to put a stop to this. They wanted it to escalate. They wanted the violence to grow. I'm talking about mayors and governors. And since recording this video, we all know what has taken place in Seattle. Right now, Seattle is a war zone. This headline reads, Seattle Autonomous Zone has armed guards, local businesses being threatened with extortion, police say. You can see right here that Capitol Hill has been completely taken over by the mobs, by the protesters. And this reminds me of that family member in my tree that I talked about in the last video message, an 88-year-old woman in my family tree who was encouraging her children and her grandchildren and other people to attack and bully people on Facebook, such as myself and others, who support President Trump and who voted for him. And so I'm wondering what her feelings and thoughts are about the situation. She lives in Seattle. Is this the result that she was wanting and hoping for? Is this something that she is comfortable with? Does she feel safe? Does she feel like this is getting results? Is she proud of her city? But this is the result of this kind of ideology. This is the result of what happens when you have a group of people that hate someone so much that they'll do anything, even if it means destroying the nation, to stop him from being re-elected. I have to say that I am very pleased with the city that I live in here in Utah. I feel safe. I feel comfortable living here. I don't feel that my life is at risk or that there's violence all around me. I can't imagine what it would be like to live in a city, a liberal city, where everything is complete chaos and a breakdown. There's no law, there's no safety. I can't imagine what that would be like. I'm so grateful for my community. I'm grateful for our Christian values and what brings us together, what unites us, and what keeps the peace in our city. And there's this image. A volunteer works security at an entrance to the so-called Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone on June 10th in Seattle, Washington. The zone includes the block surrounding the Seattle Police Department's East Precinct, which was the site of violent clashes with Black Lives Matter protesters who have continued to demonstrate in the wake of George Floyd's death. So look, you see these civilians, these citizens with these guns standing all around, keeping everybody out. They have taken over the city. They have taken over the Capitol. What does that say? And I believe, from what I've heard, the governor is okay with this. He's not doing anything about this. And I believe, as do many others, that this is for a reason. Because they want the president to do something about it. President Trump has said if the governor doesn't step in and change some things and make this city safe, take it back, he's going to have to do something. And we all know that if he has to step in, if he sends troops in, the leftist media is going to send in their photographers to be the first ones snapping photos of this and sending the message loud and clear to Americans. Is this who you want as your president? Look at this man. He's sending in troops to harm these poor citizens who are trying to protest peacefully on behalf of George Floyd for civil rights. Is this fair? Is this right? Is this who you want as your president? Yes, this is an election move. Then we had the clashes break out near the White House. There was the church that was burned down near the White House. Then you have this historic church that represents civil rights, that from its history represents civil rights and justice for all. You have this church vandalized, burned. You have all of this happening right near the White House. It's now been said that this image is a fake, but it's interesting to think that someone would create this and send it all over to create fear and anger and again stir the pot. But as I was looking at this, you can see there's a part of Lincoln's head that has been bashed in, and clearly that isn't the case. But I thought, how interesting is it that they would show an attack on Abraham Lincoln because he is the president who led us out of slavery. He's the president who abolished it. He was for Black Americans. So I think someone knew this would really enrage the right, and so they put this together to stir the pot, to add fuel to the fire. And as the president is speaking at the church, you can hear these sounds that sound like bombs exploding. I mean, it sounds like a war zone. And they're releasing the tear gas to get the protesters out of there. But it sounds like a war zone. If you're a veteran who suffers from PTSD from previous wars, I can only imagine what this is doing to you. I mean, we've seen explosions and fires and soldiers on the ground. And then we had all the curfews. The cities were given curfews where people had to be in their homes before 8 o'clock. So let's talk more about who's behind these riots, or at least who's funding them. It's no surprise that it's the same person who funded the 2016 race riots. And it's funny because if you go on to google.com, of course, and you Google George Soros funding Black Lives Matter, you will get a whole list of websites that say this is false, this is a conspiracy theory. Usually when a right-wing conspiracy theory is proven to be false, you'll see that one of the first links that pops up in your search is a Snopes article proving it false, especially when you're on Google. But that wasn't the case today. When I typed in George Soros funding the Black Lives Matter movement, These were the first links that popped up. These were the top results of my search. I wondered why Snopes wasn't there. But of course, all these links say the same thing. They say that this is false, it's not true. So I went over into Yahoo and did the same search, and look what I got. Snopes was at the very top of my search engine result, the very top. And of course, it says this is partly true and partly not true. It's a mixture of truth and falsehood. And if you click on it, here's what it will tell you. It says, here's the part that's true. A grant-making network founded by George Soros provided funding to some groups that engaged in Ferguson-related protest activities. So yes. What's false? George Soros did not give money to various groups for the express purpose of promoting Ferguson-related protests and riots. So if we're going off the honest, good word of George Soros, and we trust that, then they're saying he never said the money that he gave them was to be used for the riots. But yes, he did give money to the groups that are putting on these riots, that are overseeing all of this madness and chaos. And he donated $33 million. That is true. Just think of all the good that $33 million could do in this world. And that much money was used for these protests, for dividing America. And so it's no wonders that this won't show up in a Google search, because it is true. And then of course we see time and time again the paid actors who are a part of all this craziness, who somehow seem to be at every city at the right time in the right place when the cameras are rolling, and they're the ones that have the answers, they're the ones that were there witnessing it, they're the ones who somehow play a role in it, and we see the same faces, the same people every time. Here's a great example. Here's a woman who is a CNN Pentagon correspondent. She also was a Boston Marathon bombing witness. She also happened to be a Sandy Hook victim's family friend. She also happened to be a Watertown shootout witness. And she also happened to be an aide to the Syrian president. So she's the one always showing up on the news, giving a certain perspective, spilling out a certain agenda, a certain message that someone wants the public to hear. So let's go back in time for a moment to when the same strategy was being played out during an election year. So here, as you can see, on August 13th, 2016, a riot began in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You can see cars burning on fire. This also had to do with the police. It says that this was due to a fatal police shooting of 23-year-old Civil Smith. The difference here is that this only lasted 3 days, but what we're experiencing now is dragging out continually. It seems like there's never going to be an end to this. Then there was the 2016 Portland, Oregon riots, and it's interesting, there's my pay attention number 113. There were 113 people arrested. And it says that this riot was due to being opposed to the election of Donald Trump as president. So this happened in November. There were some peaceful protesters, and as we've seen before, as we're seeing right now, a group of anarchists broke off from the main group and created the riots. And again, it's to make America see, hey, this president isn't great. Look, he's already starting to divide up America. Look at how everyone's protesting and rioting, and look how there's now danger in the streets, and he just barely took office. This is all about politics. Then again, in 2016, there was the Charlotte riot. And again, this protest lasted for 3 days. This one came about because of the Keith Lamont Scott shooting. This protest, or you could call it a riot, resulted in violence. One of the protesters was killed, and numerous police officers were injured. Now, why do they continue to feed us this message of discrimination and racism? And why do they want us to dislike the police so much? And what effects does this have on society? Well, here's something I found. It says, in most extreme cases, when lack of trust is so severe, perceived discrimination can be associated not only with poor cooperation with the police, but also negative mental and physical health consequences. One recent meta-analysis of 134 studies found that perceived discrimination has a significant negative effect on both mental and physical health. Perceived discrimination also produces significantly heightened stress responses and is related to participation in unhealthy behaviors and non-participation in healthy behaviors. There has been a call for looking at the public health effects of witnessing police misconduct and brutality. This is why I believe we're seeing more and more videos of people filming violence. Look at what it does to society when everyone watches this. I saw a video yesterday that someone filmed on a subway train, and in the video you see a subway cart filled with all kinds of different races of people. You have just about every race on there. But the minority on the subway train is a white woman. But I'm not sure what her nationality is. She had a thick accent. But she was a white woman with blonde hair. And she was very angry at a certain woman standing across from her. From what I read, I think she bumped into her. And the woman across from her was an Asian lady. And all around them there were Asians, Black, Latino, you name it. And this white woman was the minority, and she began to express her hatred for this Asian woman. And she began to call her all kinds of racial words, and she even opened up her purse and pulled out an umbrella and some other objects and started throwing them at the lady and trying to hit her. She was yelling. I mean, you could just see that her heart was full of hatred. But there was a man at the back of the train filming all of this, and he was saying, "She's a Trump supporter. You know she's got to be a Trump supporter. Look at what these Trump supporters are doing to America. They're dividing us. They're racist. They're full of hatred." And anyways, she never once said her political stance or who she supports, but that's what he assumed. And then she continued to get out of control, and so they held her down for the police to come. And the black man who was filming the video said, "I'm so glad that all these other people stood with me to hold her down, because I was afraid if the police showed up and saw a black man holding a white woman, that I would be the one getting arrested, because that's the kind of America we live in." And then again, he blamed it on President Trump. Just as this article says, just as this research study shows, it's videos like this that get people worked up, upset, angry, mistrusting, and participating in unhealthy behaviors, whatever that means. Now, I've talked about my feelings and thoughts about why they want us to distrust the police, so that we remove the police. And they want it to be our own idea so that we don't resist it, because it's something we choose. And when we remove the police, then they can bring in Marxism, they can bring in communism, they can bring all kinds of things in that go against our Constitution and completely destroy it, that completely transform this country into something that it shouldn't be. And I've made this comparison before to Nazi Germany. Well, let's take a look at the past and see how this worked out and what happened. It says the Nazi state increased staff and training and modernized police equipment. The Nazis offered the police the broadest latitude in arrests, incarceration, and the treatment of prisoners. The police moved to take preventative action. That is, to make arrests without the evidence required for a conviction in court, and indeed without court supervision at all. Conservative policemen were initially satisfied with the results of their cooperation with the Nazi state. Crime did indeed go down, and the operation of criminal gangs ended. Order was restored, but there was a price. The Nazi state was not a restoration of the imperial tradition. It was at its core thoroughly racist. The Nazis took control and transformed the traditional police forces of the Weimar Republic into an instrument of state repression and eventually of genocide. We need to learn from history so that we don't repeat it. I went onto the website of the World Sustainable Development Goals, which is basically Agenda 2030. It's completely in plain sight. Anyone can look this up. It's public information. This is their goal by the year 2030, to have this throughout the whole world. Here it is, number 3. It says, we resolve between now and 2030 to end poverty and hunger everywhere, to combat inequalities within and among countries, to build peaceful, just, and inclusive societies, to protect human rights and promote gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, and to ensure the lasting protection of the planet and its natural resources. We also resolve to create conditions for sustainable, inclusive, and sustained economic growth, shared prosperity, and decent work for all, taking into account different levels of national development and capacities. This is just a fancy way of saying we are going to take away all your freedoms that you enjoy right now by the year 2030. When you go look at this and you read through everything that they're trying to establish by the year 2030, you can see right through it. You can see what this really is. But no one's really talking about this because we're all being distracted. So everything that it says in this agenda that they want to fix, right now they're trying to create the problems, loud and clear. They're trying to manufacture the problems and say, see, these are the problems and they exist, they're real, and they're happening all over the world. Let us come in and change things so that we can achieve these goals and have peace on the planet by 2030. That's how they're doing it. They're getting us so distracted with all of this manufactured chaos and fear that we want an answer. We want to turn to someone else to come in and transform things so that we can have peace. This is a part of the plan. And let's take a look at goal number 16. It says, promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Let's translate this into layman's terms. Grant legal immunity to illegal aliens and protected minority groups, which will be free to engage in any illegal activity, including openly calling for the mass murder of police officers, because they are the new protected class in society. Inclusive institutions means granting favorable tax structures and government grants to corporations that hire LGBT workers or whatever groups are currently in favor with the central planners in government. Use the IRS and other federal agencies to selectively punish unfavorable groups with punitive audits and regulatory harassment, all while ignoring the criminal activities of favored corporations that are friends of the political elite. And according to this article, the end result is total enslavement of the planet by 2030. In fact, the World Economics Forum showed a video of their conference back in January, and they talked about this great reset that they're planning. This is what everything is being set up for, because they want to reset the whole world. They want to reset everything. They want to start over. And they talk about why and how they're going to do it. And this is all just as plain as day, just out in the open. There's nothing that's trying to be hidden here. And Prince Charles is a part of this. In fact, he's in this video and he talks all about it and how excited he is. Other events. Then I see this on the Weather Channel. Zombie fires reignite in the Arctic. Just what is a zombie fire? This article in the Washington Post says, zombie fires are erupting in Alaska and likely Siberia, signaling severe Arctic fire season may lie ahead. And it says that the cold Arctic winter typically snuffs out the seasonal wildfires that erupt in this region. But every once in a while, a wildfire comes along that refuses to die. These blazes are known as zombie fires or holdover fires, and they can burrow into the earth beneath the surface so they can hide, but continue to burn and smolder under the snowpack throughout the entire winter. And it says that the Siberian Arctic is seeing record warm conditions in recent weeks and months, and so scientists are monitoring these wildfire trends. And they're becoming more convinced that some of the blazes erupting in the Arctic are actually left over from last summer. Then a video pops up in my feed that says America on Path to Destruction by Ezra Taft Benson. The prophet Ezra Taft Benson was talking about this. I listened to this video and he's talking about socialism and communism, and he's warning with everything that was happening back then in the 60s that was leading to the destruction of America. And here we are today. Then there's this screenshot. I went onto the 11th Hour Worker Facebook page, and in that moment, there were 441 members. 144. Again, as I've said, when I see this number, my pay attention number 144, I see it back to back all throughout the day. Someone's trying to get my attention. This is a gathering number. The gathering of Israel. Then my number 123 or 321, which represents the final countdown. As I've said before, you'll hear I'll give you to the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, and then something happens, or you hear it as a countdown, 3, 2, 1, boom. Well, as I was pondering this all week long, I made an online purchase and my total came to 123. There it was, the final countdown. We are counting down the seconds to midnight. That night that all this craziness broke out, my phone goes off at almost 11:30 p.m. to show that a large earthquake had just taken place in Peru. You had the storms rolling in, the earth shaking, all of this happening in the physical, representing what's happening in the spiritual, all over the earth. Then just a few minutes later after this earthquake, I see this on Twitter from KSL. The 9th Street fire near Ogden Canyon is estimated at 15 to 20 acres and growing. So then we had a canyon on fire. I'm hearing Utah's on fire. This was the day that all the protests broke out in Salt Lake. Here's the next screenshot. There's the number 111, a number to me that has always represented unity, being one with the Godhead, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. The enemy is trying everything to stop the disclosure of corruption and arrests of high-level leaders through division and civil war. Won't happen. Some things must take place. Nothing is to stop what's coming. These people are evil. Do not fear. God is here. So this person was saying, this is a big distraction so that we don't pay attention to what's happening behind the curtain over here. Think about it. This is the trial of the century and no one's talking about it. We have all these arrests that are supposed to happen, justice that's finally going to be served. We have some senators that have been talking about it this week, how even though it feels like a slow process, it is going to happen before the end of the year. So as this is all taking place right now, it's like right after this news broke, suddenly there's this huge distraction and all of America turns their head to look over here. And this has dominated the headlines and all of our talk and conversation for almost 2 weeks now. Here's another screenshot. How do you change the narrative from exposing the most corrupt presidency, Barack Obama, in American history? Start a race war. They want us divided. Notice the liberal sports and Hollywood stars now being activated as well. Don't fall for their tactics. Justice will be served. Then President Trump tweeted, "The National Guard has been released in Minneapolis to do the job that the Democrat mayor couldn't do. Should have been used 2 days ago and there would not have been damage and police headquarters would not have been taken over and ruined. Great job by the National Guard, no games." When I saw this tweet, right away I saw my number, 144. It's interesting, in hindsight, that the mayor had no interest in the National Guard coming out and protecting police headquarters. They didn't care what happened. Well, now it makes sense because the city of Minneapolis has gotten rid of the police force. They're not going to have police anymore. It makes sense that they could care less what happened to the police headquarters. They wanted the people to destroy it. They wanted this to be the people's decision. Here's another screenshot from Mike Pence. Today is the culmination of 3.5 years of renewed leadership in space. It's a tribute to the courage of our astronauts, American ingenuity, at NASA and SpaceX, the support of the American people, and the vision and leadership of President Trump. So here's the tweet that comes out that day, that the rocket launches. We have this great news, this successful rocket launch, and this renewed hope in America. And just moments later, these riots break out for the first time and all of America is on fire. Again, they want to distract us so that we turn our head this way and we don't see what's happening over here. Either because it makes President Trump look good and they don't want us to see it, or it makes their side look bad so they don't want us to see that. Here's another tweet from President Trump. Minnesota governor says, we estimate 80% of the rioters are from out of state. So this was the following day. We started finding out 80% of all of these rioters aren't even from these cities where they're rioting. It's exactly what I thought. It's exactly what I said. The moment this all happened, I knew they were from out of state. They had been hired to come cause chaos and lead the destruction. More tweets from President Trump. The professionally managed so-called protesters at the White House had little to do with the memory of George Floyd. They were just there to cause trouble. The Secret Service handled them easily. Great job last night at the White House by the U.S. Secret Service. They were not only totally professional, but very cool. I was inside, watched every move, and couldn't have felt more safe. They let the protesters scream and rant as much as they wanted. Here's another screenshot on Twitter. It says, in an ironic twist of fate, CNN headquarters is being attacked by the very riots they promoted as noble and just. So it's just so funny to see people turn against their own people. Here's another screenshot. Again, it's a pay attention number 111. It represents unity. For me, it's always represented unity. It says executive order on preventing online censorship. So President Trump signs this executive order shortly after this happens to prevent online censorship, which has been a huge problem this year and is definitely interfering with the election and playing a role in politics. Here's a positive screenshot from KSL.com. It says, one moment, I keep going back to today. This woman walked into the Salt Lake City protest this afternoon yelling something like, all lives matter. She was instantly scolded by protesters for a minute or two until this man, a black man, showed up and put his arm around her and worked to calm the situation down. There's my pay attention number down at the bottom. I didn't circle it, but it's the countdown number 1, 2, 3. This was 11:23 p.m. Here's another screenshot. While everyone seems to focus on the negative, here's what the media doesn't show you. These are people helping clean up after the looting and rioting, people helping those that have been taken advantage of, a glimmer of hope in humanity when we need it most. And then just for the sake of humor, someone shared this. It says, this was on the day of the rocket launch. Congratulations to the astronauts who left Earth today. Good choice. Here's another screenshot that says, the media is filling your head with fake news. This is the same photo of a movie from World War Z. So it shows that MSNBC showed this screenshot when they were showing footage of New York. It shows all the smoke coming up and the fire. And then someone happened to notice that this is actually a scene from a movie. MSNBC wanted to make it look worse than it was. So as I've mentioned, history repeats itself. So I went back to the 2016 elections and found this. It said a few weeks ago, Black Lives Matter was chanting, what do we want? Dead cops now in New York City. I know that the NYPD has always felt this disconnection with the mayor of New York City. They've always felt that he doesn't have their back, that he's their enemy, and they've always struggled with that because he never puts a stop to any of this. He seems to encourage it. It says what we have is a violent group, the new Black Panthers, who have joined forces with the Nation of Islam to control this group called Black Lives Matter, who claims they are peaceful, but their chants seem to say otherwise. So during the 2016 elections, we also saw this Black Lives Matter movement. We saw this organization, and President Obama said nothing about it. He did nothing to stop it. This article talks about how it was open season on law enforcement. declared by Black Lives Matter. Now, after the elections were over and President Trump had won, we saw this really ramp up, and Obama seemed to support it. He certainly wasn't speaking against it, and I believe this was the beginning of the left trying to interfere with President Trump's presidency. They wanted to create chaos from the very beginning. It was their way of saying, look, America voted in Donald Trump, and now suddenly we're having race wars and race riots. What does that tell you? He's bad for America. Here's another tweet. Remember when George Soros sponsored the Ferguson riots? Is there a connection? That's exactly where my mind went when these riots first broke out. I immediately thought of George Soros because history repeats itself. We've been through this before, and it wasn't that long ago. So here's the Black community speaking out on Twitter about this. Here's another one. Y'all are sheep. This is a paid agent working for George Soros and the paid white left liberals who should run Black Lives Matter, not a cop. Soros' goal is destroying America from within with race wars and civil unrest. They film blacks and blame them for the riots, but it's paid whites. Here's another one. Black Lives Matter is not a righteous movement. The movement is funded by George Soros, aka infiltrated. And another one. Every time Black Lives Matter hashtag trends, white European millionaire George Soros gets paid. And another one. In 2015, following Freddie Gray's death, Soros' memo showed he donated $650,000 to Black Lives Matter and specifically questioned how he could shape the movement as opposed to facilitate its direct action. And another one. He's not wrong though. Research George Soros. He funds both Black Lives Matter movement and the LGBT movement. Here's another tweet. It was on my timeline also a few days ago. I saved the picture but didn't get who posted it. Here's what I mean when I talk about the people at the top who are pulling the strings, who are the mastermind behind all of this, how they're purposely creating these rumors to feed the fuel on both sides. Here's an example of this. Here's a tweet that shows two buses pulling into Minneapolis, and the buses appear to say Soros Riot Dance Squad. Sounds kind of funny. But immediately it had all these people angry and upset that it was so blatantly obvious that these rioters were being paid by George Soros, and he was behind all of this. So it made a lot of people angry, but then you had a lot of people angry because they said, clearly this is photoshopped, and you're part of the problem by spreading this around. So as you can see, things like this just keep popping up and happening everywhere that are just adding more fuel to the flames. And another tweet from Attorney General Barr, quote, in many places it appears the violence is planned, organized, and driven by anarchic left extremist groups, far left extremist groups using Antifa-like tactics. Someone else tweeted, remember how I made the connection yesterday between the two auto zones that were set on fire and Target getting ransacked and looted? It all makes a lot more sense now, all of it. It shows two screenshots. May 17th, 2008, George Soros buys AutoZone. Then August 31st, 2011, George Soros buys more of Target Corporation. Another tweet from Trump. My fellow Americans, my first and highest duty as president is to defend our great country and the American people. I swore an oath to uphold the laws of our nation, and that is exactly what I will do. And of course, that made a lot of people mad on the left. Another screenshot. Cops in the crosshairs. Mobs target police around the country. 4 shots in St. Louis, 1 in Vegas, Bronx hit and run caught on video. And then this news, Trump tweets Antifa will be labeled a terrorist organization, but experts believe that's unconstitutional. So yes, the president came out and declared Antifa as a terrorist organization, and that he was going to deal with them the same way we would deal with terrorists. He says the United States of America will be designating Antifa as a terrorist organization. Then President Nelson came out and shared his thoughts on all of this. I have the screenshot here if you want to pause it and read it, but something that stood out to me is he said, "The Creator of us all calls on each of us to abandon attitudes of prejudice against any group of God's children. Any of us who has prejudice toward another race needs to repent." So during these crazy times, we're hearing our prophets say, repent, repent, repent. It reminds me of biblical times and times in the Book of Mormon when the prophets were telling the people, you need to repent. So the first day that these riots and protests broke out throughout America, the first day it came to Salt Lake, I said to my husband that night, that's where it's going next. I can feel it. And he said, no, I don't think that's going to happen. They're not going to get involved. Sure enough, the very next day, it had spread to Europe. And now it's happening all over the world. Here's a screenshot. It says, why are there fake protests in Europe? And there was my pay attention number 311. Third day power in this 11th hour. Pay attention. Another screenshot, I ordered something online for my business and it happened to come with 144 pieces in a bag. I've just been seeing that number all the time, every day. Another screenshot. Fulton DA announce arrest warrants for 6 APD officers in connection with the arrest of 2 college students Saturday night. So we have 2 black police officers arresting 2 black college students, and the college students were so upset about it. This was amidst all the rioting. They raised their voice and these 2 black police officers were fired. So again, it's not a white versus black issue. It's a humanity issue. That's what I'm noticing. What about you? So they ended up firing 6 police officers. 5 of them are black, 1 of them is white. And because right now, police all over are being extra careful on the job because of what's happening, they're having to dig up videos from the past that are similar to the George Floyd incident because they need to have stories that are continually circulating to keep that anger going, to keep that fuel burning. This was just breaking news right now as I was editing this video. Another screenshot, there's my pay attention number 113. When I say 113, it's a number that represents family history work for me. It says church leaders discuss the significance of the Layton, Utah temple. So the temple, that connection to family history work. So I was on my phone one day in the car with my sister and we were talking about all of this. And all of a sudden this bird just appears right on my window, right by my mirror on the passenger side. And he's trying to get into my car. He's tapping at the window like a little woodpecker. And so I kind of rolled the window down a little bit and he was trying to get in. He seemed pretty happy, pretty content. He just wanted to get my attention. And I kept looking at him and I was making loud noises and loud sounds to see if he would be scared away. And he wasn't. He ended up walking around the front of my car and coming right up to my face on the front windshield and tapping and looking at me and tapping. And then he came around this side and he just kept coming around all my windows trying to get in. But it felt like he was trying to say hello. He felt very friendly, very calm, just trying to get my attention. I'm not sure what that meant. I haven't pondered it, but I remember there was a time when I made a video about lots of birds trying to get my attention. I had birds crash landing in my yard, birds flying around me or landing near me. I just had all these encounters with birds. So when that happened, I really felt, pay attention, pay attention. It was so interesting. I'm not sure what kind of a bird this is, but if someone out there recognizes it and you could tell me what bird this is, that might help me with my pondering on this. Then yesterday, I'm on the phone again with my sister while we're both on a walk. And as soon as she gets home, she says, oh my goodness, this is so strange. There is a duck in my yard. She said, there's just this duck sitting here and it's quacking at me. And while I stayed on the phone with her, the duck stayed and it quacked at her. So she said, I'm going to put you on FaceTime so you can see this. So she did. And sure enough, it was just quacking at her over and over and over. And this went on for quite a while. And I said, well, maybe it's trying to get your attention. maybe it has some baby ducklings that are stuck somewhere in a drain and it's trying to get your attention, so maybe you should follow it. So she decided to follow the duck, and it went all the way around the neighborhood and came right back and just started walking in circles. And she said, well, it doesn't seem like he's trying to lead me anywhere, so I'm not sure what's going on. But he just continued to quack, and she says, I feel like he's trying to tell me something. And it reminded me of this bird from just a few days before when we were on the phone again while we were both out on a walk, and this bird was trying to get my attention. So there's something going on here. Not quite sure yet what this means, but again, as I always say, look for patterns. There's always a message. This was in a moment when I was talking with my sister on the phone about all the husbands and men who had been dying and committing suicide within just the last couple of days. How we knew so many men were dying or ending their lives, and how it just seemed to be a pattern. And right as we're talking about this, I see this bird. And right when I got home, I walk into the house, and the first thing my husband says to me is a friend of his had just committed suicide, a friend that he worked with, and how shocked he was and how sad he was. And again, my thoughts went back to that bird at my window. Here's another screenshot. The world's largest free-flying American flag has been ripped in half after a thunderstorm. Again, here we see a message in the weather. Here's a screenshot of what the flag looked like. You can see it's being held together by a thread. You see this single little thread right here underneath the blue that's holding the two separated pieces together. The flag is being held together by a thread. What does that remind you of? I'm feeling it right now. The prophet Joseph Smith prophesied that there would come a day when the Constitution would be hanging by a thread. That's what we're experiencing right now as we see through these movements the Constitution being trampled and our rights and our freedoms being taken away so quickly, just pulled out right from underneath us. Here was a manifestation of that. Again, a manifestation in the physical of what's happening in the spiritual. Here's some commentary on this. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. That was from Revelation chapter 18. The world's largest free-flying American flag was torn in half after severe thunderstorms in Wisconsin on Tuesday. Evening. The Acuity Insurance flag, located in the company's headquarters and weighs 340 pounds. It is nearly 100 feet taller than the Statue of Liberty. Many of the comments shared sentiments like, America's torn, or kind of ironic with everything else going on in America at the moment. One person called it a sign that we should read loud and clear. Another paid attention to the pattern of the rip to offer a bit of hope by pointing out that the blue portion, which represents vigilance, perseverance, and justice, remains intact. Here's another screenshot. America has officially entered a civil war it won't recover from. Hidden rabbis warn. Then as I'm scrolling through Facebook, there's my number again, 144. Then my friend shared this. This is a screenshot of her playing Scrabble online with her cousin. She said this is her cousin that she does family history work with a lot. And she says, isn't it funny? Look at our scores, 144 and 113. 113 represents family history work, as I've said, and 144 represents the gathering. That was pretty awesome. She also shared this screenshot. There's the number 113. And she said it just caught my attention that these flashes of screensaver photos on my husband's computer, I look over and I see the number 113, then I see this image, and there's a little quote at the top that says, we're headed for a rather momentous meeting with this heavenly body, so whatever you do, she said, and of course 113 is a pay attention number, so she said, I felt I needed to pay attention to what it was saying. As if things couldn't get any crazier. We saw this happen shortly after President Trump came into the White House. The witches came out to work against him. And this last week, we had a full moon. And on the weekend of the full moon, there was an invitation going around from the witch community. I know it sounds crazy, but it's real. I saw it in many other places. Here's a screenshot from Instagram. It says, pray for the president. And then it shows this invitation that says, witches and pagans, on June 5th, we're all putting up protection spells for the protesters and or hexing the illegitimate president and complicit GOP. If you believe in the threefold law and or you don't believe in hexing, quotations, spicy blessings, you can just do a protection spell for the protesters. If you're a beginner witch, light an orange candle and make your intentions clear that the protesters are protected. No orange candle, white can be subbed for any color. Put up wards and cast circles. Fight institutionalized racism and fascism. Stay safe, blessed be. And there were videos sent to me of people in the Christian community saying, look, the witches are planning on hexing and cursing the president and joining together on the night of the full moon, collectively, all over the country, all over the world, to cast spells against the president. So we need to counter that by ramping up our prayers to protect the president. Right around the same time, the same day, I see this screenshot of lightning striking the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. If that's not a sign, I don't know what is. Here's another screenshot with my pay attention number 311. This is Candace Owens giving her perspective on everything happening with the protests and the riots. So on June 5th, again, you see this manifestation in the physical of what's happening in the spiritual. We just had this spiritual battle of the witches versus the believers. The army of God versus the army of darkness going to battle in spiritual warfare. That very day that this took place, day of the full moon, this huge storm comes rolling in, and I filmed it right here, and it just blew things all over the yard. You could just really feel it in the weather. You could feel it in the air that something was happening. Same day, I see this screenshot right here. Tropical storm Cristobal advances toward the Gulf Coast. When I had first heard about Cristobal, I thought I need to look up that name because, as I've talked about in past videos, I believe there's meaning in names. And I found meaning before in past storms. And I saw Christ in Cristobal, which means Christ, but I never had the time to look into it. Thank goodness someone did. And she posted, the name of the storm that will soon make landfall was just brought to my attention. The meaning of Cristobal is Christ bearer. And a bearer is a carrier or a messenger. How interesting that it should be here now. So right after this intense spiritual battle between the forces of good and evil take place physically here on the earth, we see this spiritual manifestation and this spiritual battle ramping up. We see the bearer of Christ about to hit land, about to touch ground on America. And it comes right to the heartland, right to the heart of America. As I've shared in past videos, when the Lord directs our attention to the heartland, he's directing our attention to the hearts of America, the hearts of the people here on the land. There's a messenger who bears Christ, who's bringing a message to the hearts of the people. That's what's coming. That's what this represents to me. And I know many of you have said the same thing, that on Sunday, as we're having home church, all of a sudden we get this weather alert pop up on the TV and interrupt. This was just after the spoken word. We were listening to this beautiful message, and all of a sudden we get this weather alert that just pops up on the TV and says major storm coming. With dangerous winds and dangerous hail. And suddenly the lights start to flicker in our house. The kids start to get a little bit scared. And I thought, wow, something is really going on here. Here's my pay attention number on the back of a car, 113. This was interesting. Here was another pattern. A friend messaged me. Her last name is, I don't know if it's pronounced Reno or Rhino. Looks like Rhino. Right as I hear the alert for her message, I see that I had another alert from Twitter right below that, and the first word in that tweet is rhino. So I see rhino and rhino. As I've said before, when you see patterns and you see things repeat, it means pay attention. So I did a new search for rhino, and this came up. Rhinos oppose 2020 Trump election. This shows all the different Republicans who are not supporting Trump in this coming election. It says Senator Mitt Romney will not support Trump's re-election come November. In late March, Trump called Romney a rhino in a tweet. A rhino is a Republican politician who is a Republican in name only, but their behaviors, actions, and political views extremely differ from conservative values. And that sums up how I feel about John Huntsman Jr. But these rhinos who refuse to support President Trump in the upcoming election are more concerned about personal issues, they're more concerned about themselves than they are the welfare of the entire country, because this is a pivotal election. So much hinges on who wins. So I got thinking about how 2020 was supposed to be the year that Pope Francis entered into that pact with global leaders to create that one world religion. It was supposed to happen in May of this year. And here we were coming out of May, and I hadn't heard anything about it. So I did a search for it, and here's what I found. It was supposed to take place on May 14th, 2020. And one news source pointed out, it says one world religion to rule them all, Christian Week. On May 14th, the Vatican will be hosting a major educational event to advance the Pope's agenda. It says Pope pushes one world religion on Israel's Independence Day. But because of coronavirus, they had to move the date. But listen to this. They have now moved this event to October. Remember, we talked about in the last video things to pay attention to this coming fall, especially in October and November. Not only with the Jewish holy days, but with the harvests. We have General Conference happening in October. October is the month of the harvest of the olives. We talked about what the olive harvest means. So this is something I'll definitely be paying attention to. As I got into reading this more, it said, amid the COVID-19 pandemic, Pope Francis says it might be time for some sort of universal basic income. This may be the time to consider a universal basic wage, to acknowledge and dignify the noble essential tasks, and to achieve the ideal of no worker without rights. That was alarming. Here was the countdown number on a screenshot that says homeless man exposes the New World Order. And we have some more records. Record number of Minnesotans have permits to carry guns in public. And then this, we're only 3 days into hurricane season and it's already a record breaker. Chicago sees its deadliest day in 60 years with 18 murders in 24 hours. Wow, the hearts of men in this country are waxing cold. Remember, Illinois is located in the heartland, so again, the heart of America is waxing cold. And let's go to the West Coast to another blue city. LA homicides up by 250% over last week. LAPD reports. Now, I'm not sure when this happened, but Yahoo News keeps posting these stories on their front page. There's a different one every day. It says, man died in police custody as reality show filmed. I Googled the circulating rumor that George Floyd was staged and that the man who you saw on camera was not the real George Floyd. Well, anyways, I Googled it. And I happened to notice I Googled it at 11:44. There's that number, 144. And on that same Google search, here's my countdown number, 1, 2, 3. Here's a screenshot of Seattle. It says there was a sign posted that says you are now leaving the USA. And because police officers and cops are a sensitive issue right now, we're hearing that Cops, the TV series, won't return after 32 seasons because of the protests. There's also changes being made with Gone with the Wind. I'm glad I showed my kids that movie a couple months ago during lockdown. I thought it was a movie that they should see. and I'm glad they got to see it because it might be disappearing. If we erase our history and we erase our culture, how will we ever learn? Here's a screenshot of a tweet. It says, "How many black lives are saved each year by the police? Don't those thousands of Black Lives matter?" I saw this on Twitter. Ice Cube, the rapper, tweeted this, and it shows police department badges throughout the United States, and the one thing that they all have in common is the Freemason logo on the front. As you can see it right there, it's the compass. So I think he's trying to denote that there's some kind of corruption going on, something sinister, in relation to the Freemasons and the police departments. So after my last video that I published, I woke up one morning. Facebook showed me a memory. It showed a memory of 6 years ago. We had this major neighborhood flood. There was a pipe that broke under the street and it flooded the whole neighborhood and water was just rushing through. Well, I woke up to that memory and I thought, I'm glad that's not happening today. Just hours later, I kid you not, those of you who follow me, you already know the story. My son comes running in the house and says, Mom, it happened again. I had no idea what he was talking about, so I go running outside and I see huge flood in the neighborhood and a pipe in the street that had broke. It wasn't the same pipe as last time, it was a different pipe. Oh, what's going on with their pipes? Before that happens.
That is.
I will, Mom. There you go. There's your moment.
I'm here and I'm helping and it's terrible. It's just terrible. It looks like the Hoover Dam broke.
Okay, Mom. All right, Mom. And of course, the city had to come out and shut off the water to the whole neighborhood to repair it. But you see, when things happen in patterns, that sends a message to me. Pay attention. There's a message in this. So I started paying attention, and as I realized it was 6 years to the date that this pipe broke and we had another neighborhood flood. Why was it 6 years? What is it I needed to focus on with the number 6? Why was it a flood? What do I need to know about floods? I quickly realized as I started to look into this day that that day was the 144th day of the year. There was my pay attention number, 144. This was big. 144 always represents the gathering of Israel. So we have the gathering, we have flood, we have the number 6. So later that day, as I was pondering, this happened 6 years ago, what could the number 6 mean? I randomly came across this on churchofjesuschrist.org. Check it out. I was reading through the 7 Seals timeline on churchofjesuschrist.org on the church website, and this caught my attention right here, number 7, in regards to the 7th seal. It says it occurs about 2000 AD to 3000 AD. It says 6 judgments, which is in Revelation 8 and Revelation 9. 6 of 7 trumps now sound, signaling 6 coming judgments on the earth. 1, hail and fire mingled with blood are cast upon the earth. 2, a great burning mountain is cast into the sea. 3, a great star falls, affecting 1/3 of fresh water. 4, 1/3 of heavenly bodies turn dark. 5, the sun is darkened by smoke. A 5-month battle plagues mankind. Of such extent is called a woe. And number 6, a 13-month war plagues mankind, but men still don't repent, suggesting clearly the purpose for the judgments of God. There it was. There was my number 6. I'm feeling it all over. I'm feeling it right now. 6 years ago to the day, the Lord is showing me this theme of Noah. Remember what happened with Noah? The Lord flooded the earth because the people were so wicked and they would not repent. There was a gathering of all the animals and then gathering Noah and his family onto the ark before all the destruction happened. 6 years later to the date, we have that same flood with all these themes, which I believe is a message telling us, or telling me, that because of the state of men's hearts right now, waxing cold, being hardened, and they're refusing to repent, here's what's on the horizon. The 5-month battle and the 13-month war really stands out to me because it feels like right now we're experiencing war, civil war, and that it's only going to get worse before something gets better. So to me, 6 years to the date symbolized 6 judgments that are on the horizon. That's what's coming next. And as you can see from weather headlines, we've had all kinds of record-breaking weather over the last several weeks. Look at the size of this hail right here. Then there was this screenshot that stood out to me. Someone posted this article that says, coronavirus, floods, and locust swarms. Kenya is fighting a triple whammy of crises. It says, according to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, more than 20 million people are in severe acute food insecurity in East Africa, and Kenya is still under curfew. We're seeing tribulations happening all over the world, and they just seem to be escalating. We've got the Mormon crickets that are showing up again here in Utah. Back to the flood that happened in my neighborhood. Yes, there's more to the story. That same day, several things broke in our house. We had a lawnmower break, plates that fell in the driveway and broke, a mirror that broke. I picked up one of our handheld mirrors and the handle just fell off right in my hand. Then we had the pipes in the street break. So we have broken pipe, broken lawnmower, broken mirror, broken plates. So I'm hearing the word broken or break. Then while this flood is happening, I walk into the house, I walk into my bedroom, and I see that someone had turned the TV on and left it on. And guess what movie happens to be playing? Evan Almighty. Here's a screenshot of what I saw on the TV. Basically Noah and the flood. There he is. I walk in on the scene where God delivers the wood and he's supposed to build this ark. So we're having a flood. A movie about Noah and the flood is on TV. It's the 144th day of the year, 6 years to the date. Again, the number 144 represents the gathering of Israel. And just what was Noah doing with the ark? He was gathering the animals 2 by 2, safely gathering in the animals and his family before destruction came. So I go to the scriptures and I type in the keywords broken and flood. This is the only scripture that came up. Daniel chapter 11, verse 22. There's our numbers. We have 11 for the 11th hour, which is what we're living in right now. And the number 22, as we've talked about before, as my friend Beth pointed out to me, represents 2 by 2. The animals boarded the ark 2 by 2. So 22 is also a gathering number. So here we have the scripture that says, and with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. So the book of Daniel in chapter 11 is about a vision that Daniel sees. And in this vision, he sees the successive kings and their wars, leagues, and conflicts that lead up to the second coming of Christ. So throughout chapter 11, we hear about this king from the north and this king from the south, and they make war with each other. That leads right in to the end time and the return of the Lord. Now, contemporary Christians believe that chapter 11 is all about the career and the destruction of the Antichrist. But the majority of Christians believe that this prophecy has already been fulfilled. And in verses 20 through 39, it's believed that this is all about Antiochus, who reigned between 175 and 164 BC. And verse 22 was about his removal of the high priest Onias III. As I continued to read up about Daniel chapter 11, I got thinking about how he talks about this king of the north and this king of the south and how they make war with each other. And I couldn't help but think about what we've been talking about today. We've been talking about this current civil war and its relation to racism. When you think about the original civil war that took place in this country, you think about the North and the South. but you also think about what it was they were fighting for. Here we hear about this king from the north and this king from the south and how they engage in this great war. And as you can see here, Elder Joseph Fielding Smith specifically identified Daniel 11 through 12 as referring to the last days. Well, that would be now. That would be the time that we're living in now. And as I was reading in a lesson manual about Daniel chapter 11, I came across this. It says, the Savior recognized the domination of Satan over the world generally and called him the prince of the world. But in a special way, in the way that Brother Ezra Taft Benson has referred to, he has entered into the politics of the world among the nations of the world and already subjugated about 1 billion people of the world, and by a dire, sanguinary, and deadly philosophy has brought death to millions and has brought slavery to almost 1 billion people. So there's another keyword, slavery. There it is. That's what we've been talking about. That's what the original Civil War was about. That's what we're dealing with right now with the battle between good and evil. It truly is the battle between freedom and slavery. Now back to verse 22. The key words that stand out here are flood, broken, and covenant. We learn from Doctrine and Covenant, section 133, that Babylon, the word Babylon specifically represents any people who have strayed from the Lord's ordinances and have broken his everlasting covenant. Babylon is a symbol for wickedness, and we know at the time of the flood, the earth was filled with wickedness. I read this on the Wikipedia and I loved it. It says, some Christian biblical scholars suggest that the flood is a picture of salvation in Christ. The ark was planned by God, and there is only one way of salvation through the door of the ark, akin to one way of salvation through Christ. Additionally, some scholars commenting on the teaching of the Apostle Peter connect the ark with the resurrection of Christ, the waters burying the old world but raising Noah to a new life. And this is also symbolized in baptism. So we talked about how Babylon represents people who have broken the Lord's everlasting covenant. And when I think about the ark, I think about the new covenant that God made with Noah, that he would never flood the earth again. And of course, he showed that with a token of the rainbow. So I'm hearing the words ark and covenant, and I'm thinking of course, the Ark of the Covenant, which of course represents the earthly dwelling place of Jehovah, so the house of the Lord, the temple. And here again, I'm thinking about the new and everlasting covenant, which we enter into in the temple. So I'm just seeing this repeat and pattern of these words: flood, ark, covenant, and broken. Then I came across my pay attention number 113, and it says, broken covenant promises kept. Man rejected God. God has kept every promise he made. Man broke the covenant. God forgave and redeemed through a new covenant, Jesus the Messiah. Now, before this flood happened in my neighborhood, on May 18th, I happened to order the book, The Covenant by Tim Ballard. It's called The Covenant, One Nation Under God. And Tim talks about how America has broken its covenant with God. Keeping the covenant provides liberty, protection, and prosperity. Now think about what's going on in our country right now. Think about the economy. Think about protection, and think about our liberty. This is all being taken away right now. And according to Tim, it's because America has broken its covenant. Isn't it interesting that I've been reading about this, and then this flood happened in my neighborhood, which led me to these scriptures and these keywords that are talking all about this. In another conversation with my friends, Beth said this: Lindsay, you've talked about that crazy pipe bursting again this year. The weird one I've seen is tornadoes hitting near me both years I was in Texas. Our only spring in North Carolina, and then an hour from us, our first year in Utah. They all happened the same weekend, Memorial Day weekend. And I had memories of the past ones popping up on Facebook. The same day some of them happened. Now I always get nervous this weekend every year, but it didn't happen last year. I'd also noticed that we would often get sick on the same weeks and days we posted about it in years past. I've actually stopped posting when we get sick in case it was somehow writing it into my future. It's just weird to see things repeat themselves on the same day each year. It was so interesting to me when you noted the same today. Did you feel like there was a message in it? Also interesting, the gathering numbers for today. The 144th day of the year with 222 days left to go, the number 222. Both are gathering numbers. Remember, the animals entered the ark 2 by 2. Then how you saw that Noah's Ark movie with him gathering the animals 2 by 2. Just this morning I was reading 2 Nephi 8 and 9, all about the Lord gathering Israel in the last days. I wasn't seeking the topic out, it's just where I was in my personal reading. And she circles this verse right here. It says, "They shall be restored to the true church and fold of God, when they shall be gathered home to the lands of their inheritance, and shall be established in all their lands of promise." So throughout this video, there's going to be this theme of the promised land, or the land of promise. Also, this last week, we noticed a pattern of suicides. All within just 24 hours of each other, several men, several husbands committed suicide. This was all just too much for them. They couldn't take it anymore. They couldn't take what was happening. They couldn't take not being able to work. They couldn't take the economic pinch, the stress of the unknown and the uncertainty. Not just in our world, where we had this pattern of husbands committing suicide, the one thing I noticed that they all had in common was that they were not members of a church. They were not religious. They didn't have a firm foundation in Christ or a strong testimony. Some of them were atheists. And I thought, you know what? President Nelson has told us in the coming days that lie ahead, you will not be able to survive them if you don't have a firm testimony, if you don't have a firm foundation in the Lord, if you don't have the Spirit with you every day. That was a powerful witness for me. I've also noticed a lot of people getting major trials in their life. A friend in my neighborhood who's not a member of our church, she posted on our Neighborhood Word Facebook page that her sister was just diagnosed for the second time with cancer, that she had leukemia and was immediately undergoing chemotherapy. And around that same time, she had lost her job because of the pandemic. So she was feeling this financial pinch and was now dealing with this major struggle, and she had a husband and 4 kids. So they started a GoFundMe page so they could help her with her bills. They did an online sign-up page where anyone all over the city, strangers or not, could go on and sign up to bring this family a meal. So I went on and signed up. As I watched how hard and difficult it was for them to reach out and find strangers to come help their family financially and with meals, I thought how blessed we are as members of the church. If you belong to any church for that matter, you have a community that rallies around you and helps you out. They are your family, especially in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If you lose your job, or you're faced with a health crisis, the church is there to help you. Your bishop will help you so you can pay your bills, so you can get the treatments that you need. And the Relief Society comes together and plans and brings meals to your home so you don't even have to worry about it. And I got thinking about how we're so blessed that we have that support, that we have that help, but how even more scary and difficult it must be when you don't have that, when you don't have that church family helping you out and supporting you, when you feel like you just have to do it all on your own and you have no one to reach out to. 24 hours after she shared this about her sister and asked for help, it had just been a day, maybe 2, since she had shared this. The husband of the wife with cancer died in his sleep. They're saying that he died from a diabetic seizure. And so now all of a sudden she's a widow. Now all of a sudden she doesn't have a husband. She doesn't have a job. She has 4 kids. And so they reached out to me and said, don't bring her a meal anymore. This is too much chaos at once. And it's overwhelming. And so we'd rather not have anybody over to the house, especially strangers. So don't worry about the dinner. So I wasn't able to bring them a meal. It just seems like all around me I'm hearing about so many people who are having trials and challenges that are almost too overwhelming for them to deal with. And I think what's playing into that right now is all the fear, all the uncertainty, all the chaos, the heightened tension in our nation. It's certainly not helping. And more than ever, this is a time where we really need to reach out to others and teach them the gospel. Give them that message of hope. Share that with them. Invite them into our community. Rally around them and lift them up. More than ever, we need to be strengthened individually with our own testimonies so that we can be strong and get through these times, because they're only going to get worse. I'm at the car wash and I had one more thought I wanted to add. I had this dream last night that there was this famous evangelist. He has a TV show. I used to watch his stuff. I used to share some of it in my old videos, and I know a lot of people still do. He's always seemed like a really nice guy, and he just has a TV show where he has guests on and he interviews them and they talk about miracles and all kinds of things like that. But a lot of the guests that he has on his show are the people that I talked about in my 3-part video series last fall, where I exposed a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing. And a lot of the people that I talked about in that video, I had found them originally through his show. After all the things that I learned that month, it was a crazy month, that's when I made that decision to no longer follow any of those people or watch their shows, or listen to their podcasts, or any of that. If you'll recall, that was a really good wake-up call for me. It was a really good experience that I went through. But I had this dream last night that I was standing outside of a building in some downtown city, and I think it was outside of his television studio or something like that, and he was going around with a couple of people. They were just walking up to random people on the streets, and they were trying to save those people. They were trying to bring them to Jesus and bring them into their ministry. And I remember they had this little bowl, they had this little candy dish, and it was filled with little chocolates that sort of looked like M&Ms. They were like pink and red and white candy coated chocolates, and they would walk up to people and lure them in with the candy, with the chocolate, and they'd say, "Oh, try this candy, it's so good, have some of this chocolate." And then they would start talking to them and asking them questions and really showing compassion for these people and wanting to bring them the gospel or introduce them to Jesus, you know. And I remember I was sitting there and I thought, well, eventually they're going to work their way over to me because I'm out here on the street. I wonder if they're gonna know that I know Jesus, or maybe think that I don't know Jesus, or either way they're just gonna treat me like any other stranger and just be excited to share with me their message. So I watched and I waited, and eventually they made their way over to me, and I remember when they looked at me, they didn't seem that excited. And they were just like, "Oh, do you want some of this candy?" And started talking to me, and then quickly just wanted to move on. They had no desire to talk with me or share with me their message. And I thought that was really strange. And when I woke up from my dream, I just had this feeling that in the dream, they weren't interested in me because they saw my light. And it was different. It was something they weren't used to seeing. And so that's not what they were looking for. That's not who they were wanting to talk to. And so they just moved right along. And so that dream had a profound message in it for me, and I just felt like I needed to share that. It kind of reminded me, I'm going through the car wash right now. See? I really am. But it kind of reminded me of an experience that my nephew had a week ago. My sister called and told me about this experience he had. He's in the middle of his mission right now. He had to come home because of COVID-19. He's going out in another week or two. He's being reassigned. And during this transition period, he got a job with a moving company where he would go help families move. And a week ago, sorry, that car wash was way too loud. Anyways, so my nephew said he went to this house and he was helping move this family. And he said their home was really dark. He said there were Ouija boards all throughout the house. There was feces smeared all over the wall and just trash everywhere and this heavy, dark feeling. He said no one in the family ever looked at him, or acknowledged him. And he said there was this little girl following him around, and she would clap her hands and make a sound with her mouth and just follow him everywhere he went, but she never said a word. Anyways, he said the craziest part was when he was at the bottom of the stairs and he was moving a dresser up the stairs. And the mother of the household was going up the stairs, so he was kind of waiting for her to get out of the way. And she walked up the stairs and turned the corner, and then he said all of a sudden she was standing right behind him, right against the back of him. And it scared him so bad. He was so startled, and he just wanted to get out of there. He said there was a man that came over that was like a pastor of a church, and he had a shirt on with scripture verses all over it. And he said that this pastor wouldn't even look at him or acknowledge him, but the pastor and the family would look at and talk to and acknowledge the other movers, but not him. And it made him feel very uneasy. Well, later that day, he met a stranger, and the first thing she said to him was, "There's a bunch of dark spirits following you around. I can see them." And he realized in that moment they were probably at that house and they followed him home. My sister said that he said he had been slacking on his prayers. He hadn't been praying every morning and every night, and so he had let down his guard that way. And so he was wide open and vulnerable to the attacks of the enemy. Just shortly before he goes back out on his mission, he had been starting to have doubts about going back out, and it was just clear to see that Satan is working so hard to stop him from going out. And it was just a reminder that none of us should let our guard down, that anytime we find ourselves where we're not in the mood to pray, we're not in the mood to read our scriptures, that's a strategy from the enemy. He doesn't want us to do those things, because when we do, we're protected and we have power. And when we don't, our guard is down and he can come in and attack. And I think that's been too easy to do during this time when life isn't normal. I think a lot of people are finding excuses not to pray, not to study their scriptures every day. They're finding themselves not being in the mood, and they're becoming vulnerable to the attacks of Satan. As I've been pondering all of this, I can't help but continue to reflect back on the Passover. I know we talked about that in my last video message, possibly in the video before, and we compared the pandemic to the Passover. But if we're going to make that comparison, then I think it's important that we understand the rest of that story. We understand what took place following the Passover. Because if today, on the timeline right now, we're mirroring or repeating events that are similar to what took place in the book of Exodus, then I think it's important that we become familiar with the rest of that story, because I believe there's more that's paralleling to what's happening right now and what's coming. But to sum it up real quick, after the children of Israel were stuck in their homes as the angel of death passed over, they were then led to freedom from bondage. But they had to pass through great afflictions in the wilderness before they reached the promised land, before they stepped into that freedom, before they stepped into those blessings. So I feel that's what we're experiencing right now, is we're already passing through right now these great afflictions, which I believe are the tribulations. We're heading through those tribulations, many on a personal level, personal tribulations, but then also on a world level. But it's necessary that we pass through these so that we can step into the promised land, so that we can step into those blessings, so that we can reach the happy ending of the story that we read about in the scriptures. Anyways, these last couple of weeks have been crazy, you guys, and I'm sure right after I publish this video, even more craziness will unfold. It's almost hard to keep up with it all. There's always so much happening, and it seems that there's something happening every single day. My teenage son made a joke about it the other day, and every morning he wakes up, he says, "Mom, I can't wait to find out what happens today." It's like a movie, right? But we're living in it. But anyways, I hope that the message you'll take away from today's video is that we need to be very careful that we don't stay in a place of fear, because the world is trying to put us in that place of fear and keep us there. But as I always say, fear is not of the Lord. Fear is of the adversary. Faith is of the Lord. If we step up into a place of faith and we increase the Spirit in our lives. We continue to build our testimony and talk to the Lord even more. Talk to Him morning, day, and night. Tell Him what's going on. Talk to Him about how we're feeling. Ask for His help. Praise Him for all the good that He's doing in our lives. If we can stay in those patterns, we can be strong and we can get through this. We can make it into the promised land. But if we give in to the enemy, and we give into that fear, we fall for that scheme, and we stay in a place of fear, we become enslaved to that, we're not going to make it into the promised land. We're not going to see those blessings. The civil war that we're in right now is a repeat of slavery versus freedom. In the spiritual, there is a battle going on right now of slavery versus freedom. And just like the Israelites, if we look to the Lord in our times of oppression, in our times of trials, and in our times of pain and suffering, if we look to the Lord in those moments, we will live. And we will make it into the promised land, freed from that oppression, freed from that bondage. We just have to hang on a little bit longer, and we'll soon be there. We're getting so close, you guys. We just really need to hang on to the Lord, not let go of His hand, not lose sight of Him at all. And if all the negativity gets to be too much, there's nothing wrong with shutting it out, getting it all out of your house, and just inviting in that light and that peace. We need that. Anyways, I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time.